Surely mom and dad would want to live with me rather than you, Emma, since you can't even give them grandkids. We're moving in here, so you and your husband should move out already. That's what my pregnant sister-in-law, Karen, said while patting her growing belly. She seemed pleased when I simply replied, all right, but deep down, I felt relieved. This might finally help us cut ties. My name is Emma, I'm married to Scott, and together, we've been trying to deal with infertility. I used to work as a childcare worker and have always loved children, but after getting married, I learned I had trouble conceiving. It was a huge shock. I even told Scott that if he regretted marrying someone like me, I would understand if he wanted a divorce. But Scott, being the kind person he is, told me, I didn't marry you just to have kids. I married you because I love you. If having a baby is hard, let's face this challenge together. Hearing this, we decided to start fertility treatments. I often remind myself how lucky I am to have such an amazing husband. At first, I tried balancing the treatments with my job, but it became too overwhelming. My work shifts didn't match well with my appointments, and I grew emotionally sensitive. Sometimes, I'd see little kids and cry, thinking I might never have a child of my own. Not wanting to be a burden at work, and remembering Scott had once said I could stay home if I wanted, I decided to quit my job. Now, I'm a full-time housewife focusing on our fertility journey. Scott's younger sister, Karen, knows about our struggles. She already has 4 kids and is pregnant with her 5th. Seeing pregnant women is hard for me, but Karen doesn't seem to care. She often visits with her kids and says things like, Emma, you're a housewife now, right? Why don't you watch my kids for me? It's hard managing all of them by myself. You used to be a childcare worker, so this should be easy for you. Karen would leave her 4 kids with me while she went out for beauty treatments and manicures. When I told her I couldn't keep doing this, she'd say things like, in a society where people aren't having enough kids, I'm obviously more admirable because I'm raising children. You, who can't even have kids, should just do as I say. It was frustrating to babysit her children for free, even though she was my sister-in-law. On top of that, Karen's attitude was condescending, but what hurt me the most was seeing how much her children wanted their mom's attention. They'd often ask me, when will mom be back? And it broke my heart to reply, I'm not sure. I told Scott about how Karen was dumping her kids on me while she spent her time at salons. Furious, Scott called Karen to confront her, but Karen brushed it off, saying, Emma should be glad to spend time with kids since she can't have any of her own. She used to work in childcare, so it's no big deal. Scott then spoke to Karen's husband, Rob, about the issue, but Rob sided with Karen, saying, our kids like spending time with Emma, and it's really helpful for us. If Emma gets pregnant, we won't ask her to babysit anymore, but until then, please help us out. Karen is exhausted from raising kids, and since Emma is a housewife, she should be able to help. Scott told me that if Karen ever came over, I could just send her away. But whenever she visited, her 4 kids would run straight to the back room without even saying hello. Karen would quickly say, well then, take care of them for today, and leave before I could protest. One day, Karen surprised me by actually coming into the house. Normally, she just drops her kids off and leaves, so I was caught off guard when she asked, when are you moving to the new house? Do you have any designs or something? Scott and I were building a new duplex to live with his parents. The house was nearly finished, and we were preparing to move. Despite my fertility struggles, my in-laws had never said a single negative thing to me. In fact, my mother-in-law once told me, there are plenty of happy families without children. Those words were a lifeline for me. As my in-laws were getting older and dealing with aches and pains, we decided to live together to help them before they required full-time care. So, Scott planned the duplex. It was unusual for Karen to show interest in the house, but I showed her the blueprints and images anyway. She seemed curious, asking about the number of rooms and how much sunlight the house got. I assured her everything was well planned. She also asked when we planned to move. When I told her, she simply said, I see, and left, once again leaving her kids behind. I felt uneasy about her sudden interest in the house, but didn't dwell on it at the time. Eventually, we moved into the duplex, and my in-laws joined us a few days later. Living together was smooth and peaceful, and I felt lucky to have such kind in-laws. Then, one day, Karen showed up unexpectedly, this time at the new house. Of course, she brought her 4 kids along. Without even glancing at them, she ushered them inside and turned to me. Hey, Emma, we need to talk, she said. While my in-laws were busy being overwhelmed by Karen's kids, Karen pulled me aside into the hallway. I couldn't help but worry about whether my in-laws, who often complained about back pain, could handle taking care of those energetic children. That's when Karen said something shocking. "Hey, why don't you and Scott leave this house?" I was stunned. I hadn't expected her to say something like that, but Karen continued, completely ignoring my reaction. "Surely Mom and Dad would rather live with me than with you, since you can't even give them a grandchild, and besides, I'm their real daughter by blood. We're moving in here, so you and Scott should move out soon." As she stroked her pregnant belly, Karen spoke with arrogance. It was clear her plan was to live with my in-laws and have them take care of her kids. She even pointed to my in-laws, saying, "Look how happy they are to take care of their grandkids." But all I saw were my poor in-laws struggling to keep up with the rowdy children. There wasn't a hint of joy on their faces. I knew arguing with Karen was pointless. She wouldn't listen. My anger had been building for a long time, not just because of her constant jabs about my infertility, but also because she was taking advantage of my kind in-laws. After thinking it over, I came up with an idea. So, I nodded quietly and said, "Okay, we'll move out." Karen was thrilled. She immediately set a schedule for when we would move out and her family would move in. Then, as usual, she left her kids behind and left, but I felt a sense of relief. This was my chance to cut ties with her. Time passed, and the day came when Karen and her family moved into the duplex. I wondered how their move was going when my phone rang. It was Karen. As soon as I answered, she started yelling, "What the hell is this? Why haven't you moved your stuff out? There's no room for our things. And where are Mom and Dad supposed to go?" Scott, his parents, and I had left the duplex, but we didn't take all the furniture with us. Karen was furious about this, and I calmly replied, "The move was so sudden, so we only left for now. Also, your in-laws are with us." Karen fired back angrily, "Outrageous." But I countered, "I think it's outrageous that you and your husband are moving into the house Scott built without our consent. It's also outrageous to force the kids on us while you go out and have fun, especially when we've told you how hard it is to take care of them." Karen dismissed my points, snapping, "That's not the issue right now. Can I just throw away any furniture I don't like?" I replied, "Feel free, if you're really planning to move in, but are you sure about this?" Confused, Karen asked, "What are you talking about?" That's when I revealed the truth, or rather, part of it. "Can you and your husband handle the mortgage for that house? It's a large two-family house, and it's quite expensive." Karen had no idea that the mortgage was just a lie. The house was fully paid for with the savings of Scott, his parents, and me, but the lie was enough to scare her. When Karen angrily demanded to speak with Scott, he played along. With a mischievous smile, he told her the same lie, that there was still a mortgage to pay. Over the phone, Karen apparently broke down in tears. She realized they couldn't afford the payments and decided to move back to her old home with her husband Rob and their kids. Scott reassured her that she could back out of the move and told her we would also be returning home. When we returned to the duplex, happy to have avoided Karen taking it over, she stormed in furiously, ready for another confrontation. Karen yelled at us, "You never told us there was still a mortgage. Why did you keep it from us?" I casually replied, "Because you never asked." Karen's face turned red with anger. She ranted, "The kids were so excited, thinking this house would be ours. You've disappointed them. That's why you can't get pregnant. You need to make up for it by properly taking care of the kids. Playing with them is no big deal. It's better than doing nothing." As Karen kept ranting, my usually quiet mother-in-law suddenly stood up and slapped her. Karen looked shocked, and so was I, since my mother-in-law was normally so calm. In a sharp tone, my mother-in-law said, "You can't even handle the no-big-deal task of playing with your kids and instead dump it on Emma. You wanted to move into this duplex just to force your parenting duties onto us, didn't you? I was willing to help if you were struggling to raise your children alone, but who would want to help a daughter who offloads her responsibilities onto others and acts so entitled? Leave this house immediately, and don't come back." Half crying, Karen pleaded, "Aren't you on my side, Mom? I'm your real daughter, aren't I?" My father-in-law, who was also normally quiet, spoke up sternly, "It's because you're our real daughter that this is so disgraceful. I feel ashamed to have raised such a selfish child. I've heard from Scott how you've been mocking Emma for her difficulty in having a baby. That's something no one should ever do." Karen glared at me furiously, but I felt a small pity for her. I opened the door and said, "As your parents have said, please leave. I don't intend to help with your childcare anymore, so please do your best." Karen burst into tears and shouted, "You people are monsters." Before leaving the house, She never returned after that. Later, Scott received a call from Karen while he was at work. She was sobbing so much that it was hard to understand her, but it seemed her family was already in serious financial trouble. Karen and her husband Rob had been careless with their money. Karen spent on beauty salons and manicures, while Rob wasted money on lottery tickets. When their savings ran out, Karen thought moving into the duplex Scott had built would save them from paying rent and utilities. When Karen asked Scott, who earns a good income, for financial help, he refused. He couldn't forgive her for mocking my infertility. He told her, just cut back on beauty treatments and lottery tickets. But Karen cried, saying she didn't want to. Scott couldn't bring himself to help someone so entitled, even if she was his sister. Eventually, Rob ran out of money for lottery tickets and had to take a side job to make ends meet. Karen, too, could no longer afford her beauty treatments. She used to look polished and put together, but when we bumped into her months later, she was almost unrecognizable. Scott even had to point out, "Isn't that Karen?" before I realized it was her. Despite everything, her kids seemed lively and happy around her, which was a relief. Now for the miracle part of the story. I found out I'm pregnant, with twins. I couldn't hold back my tears when the doctor told me, and Scott, who was with me, cried tears of joy too. We shared our happiness together, and my in-laws were thrilled to hear they'd finally have grandchildren. Though I haven't told Scott, I secretly believe being free from the stress Karen caused helped me get pregnant. I feel incredibly grateful for Scott and my in-laws, who supported me through everything. Their kindness and love have blessed me with 2 new lives. Now, I just hope from the bottom of my heart that my babies will be born healthy.
Currently at 30 years old, I received a call from the bank a few months ago to confirm a $150,000 loan application. However, I hadn't applied for any loan, and I had no knowledge of it whatsoever. Later I discovered that my parents had taken out a large loan in my name to fund my sister Olivia's dream wedding. Olivia was pampered from a young age, and I was never particularly close to her. While my parents may bear some responsibility, Olivia is 25 years old and should have had enough time to reconsider her actions. Even during family gatherings, we rarely see each other. The moment that shocked me was learning that my parents, whom I had barely spoken to for a long time, had taken out a substantial loan without consulting me and had even signed me up as the co-signer. I believe Olivia has been with her fiancé, John, for about a year. They got engaged a few months ago, yet I wasn't even invited to the wedding, which was the purpose of the loan. I had expected not to be invited, so I wasn't particularly bothered by it, and my parents never mentioned it, so I didn't think it was an issue. After receiving the call from the bank, I quickly phoned my parents. At first, I thought it was some mistake, but my parents immediately admitted the truth, even going as far as defending Olivia, saying, "As her sister, it's only natural to support her wedding, even if it means signing under your own name." Apparently, Olivia had discussed her need for money for the wedding with my parents, and they couldn't bring themselves to refuse her. Surprisingly, both Olivia and John are employed and should have sufficient income. Nevertheless, they claimed they couldn't cover the wedding expenses on their own funds and pleaded with my parents. Had it not been for Olivia's plan for an extravagant wedding, they could have managed without relying on our parents' assets. They even consulted John's parents, but they refused to pay and set firm limits. So why didn't my parents respond in the same way? To make matters worse, my parents anticipated that I would not agree to the loan, and they even forged my signature. They decided that confirming with me would be too much of a hassle, choosing instead not to contact me at all. When I learned this fact, I couldn't contain my anger toward my parents, but the loan had already been approved, and it was too late for me to do anything. Determined to somehow resolve this situation, I decided to take my parents to court. My father kept repeating, "It's only natural for you to help your sister as a family." Furthermore, he tried to dissuade me by saying, "If you file a lawsuit, you'll only hurt the family using my sister's involvement as a reason." After hanging up the phone in anger, I realized my father was only worried about the wedding and the impact on my sister, showing no concern over the fact that my parents had committed fraud. Afterward, I solidified my decision to take legal action, informed my parents of my intentions, and resolved to sever ties with my family. I then called the bank and requested a copy of the documents signed when the loan was contracted. I began preparing to cut ties with my family. After carefully planning the legal steps to avoid a major fallout, I contacted a lawyer. To understand the situation fully, I needed to know every detail. While reviewing the loan contract, I felt a sense of despair. What particularly caught my attention was the condition that the loan had to be repaid within 2 years. This was a heavy burden for me. My parents knew that I was planning to start my own business in the near future. Despite having spent months securing funding and seeking investors, my parents had shown no regard for my plans. They should have known I intended to quit my job soon, meaning I wouldn't have a stable income for a while. Yet now, I'm in a situation where a single late payment would trigger the obligation to repay the $150,000 loan. It seemed my parents hadn't really considered just how heavy a burden this would be. Thinking my future and personal plans were irrelevant, I logged into Facebook and searched for my sister's fiancé, John. At that moment, I felt something shift within me. If they had dragged me into this situation, I felt I needed to let everyone know the truth. I detailed how my parents had taken out a loan in my name, forged my signature, and drafted all the paperwork without my consent. I advised John to break off the engagement immediately and reconsider marrying into a family capable of such actions. Additionally, I sent the same message to my sister's friends, relatives, and my parents. I felt they all deserved to know the truth. Yet, deep down, I wondered if I had gone a bit too far. I also wanted to confirm if my sister herself knew about the situation. She was always close to our parents, so it was hard to imagine they would do something like this without her knowledge. The response was immediate. My parents were furious. They desperately begged me to retract my statements and repeatedly reached out to my sister. It turned out my sister was unaware of the loan or the fact that I was made the co-signer. Upon learning the truth, she was not only upset about being lied to but also angry that she would now have to cover the wedding expenses herself. And she was livid with our parents. As usual, my mother became emotional, loudly blaming me for destroying everything and insisting I had no right to interfere. My parents condemned me for telling John and his family the truth, but I paid them no mind. Looking back now, I wonder if there was ever truly a need to support my sister to such an extent. My parents intended to deceive me to give her the money, but then I heard from my sister, who had learned the whole story. She said, "I wasn't told about the loan, but you should have discussed it with our family before telling John and his family." My sister accused me of ruining her marriage and wedding plans. She's not entirely wrong. I admit I should have discussed the issue with the family first, but did she truly know nothing about it? I began to feel uneasy, wondering if I had gone too far. By exposing the truth, had I really done the right thing? Since I had dragged John's family into the situation and created chaos, I decided to take responsibility and resolve it once everything was settled. However, I remained firm in my decision to pursue legal action. The bank responded, stating that they would investigate the fraudulent loan application, and since the loan wasn't fully processed, I was told I wouldn't be responsible for any payments. Fortunately, a few days later, I managed to find the contact information to speak directly with John and his family. My phone wouldn't stop ringing, with calls from my parents, relatives, friends, and messages from my sister. Everyone was blaming me, saying, "You shouldn't have made a family issue public. You went too far." My sister angrily called, saying John and his family were reconsidering the wedding itself because of what I had said, leaving me extremely confused. She accused me, saying I had trampled on her life. She was deeply distressed, as she hadn't known anything about the loan or the co-signing that my parents had arranged. Hearing my sister blame me left me shocked. She advised me that if I had an issue, I should have contacted our parents directly rather than severing ties. When I emailed John and his parents, I was certainly overcome by anger, but I didn't think my actions were wrong at the time. I asked my sister, "You knew everything, didn't you?" But she kept insisting, it's none of my business. So, I once again told her how our parents had always prioritized her over me, always saying yes to her, and now committing fraud under my name to fulfill her wishes. She wasn't willing to accept that easily. Since she didn't seem to be lying, I began to wonder if I had been wrong to assume she was involved in the first place. I wasn't sure whether to trust my sister, but I wasn't ready to give up so easily. The next morning, I received a call from my mother. She was extremely upset, crying on the phone and desperately pleading with me to reconsider. My mother told me that John had broken off his engagement with my sister, but when I spoke with her last night, she didn't mention it at all. She only said the situation was difficult, without a word about him ending the engagement. I was shocked but couldn't express it, and my mother told me how distraught my sister was and how much she blamed me. It seemed that my suggestion for him to reconsider the engagement had made him feel the situation was grave. My mother went on for quite some time about how I had ruined my sister's life, torn our family apart, and caused everyone pain. I listened quietly, feeling both a sense of guilt and a strange conviction that I hadn't acted wrongly. In some corner of my heart, I couldn't deny the satisfaction of seeing my parents suffer. I felt genuinely sorry that my sister's wedding had fallen apart. When my mother finished speaking, I firmly stated, "I'm not going to apologize for telling them the truth." I reminded her not to forget that they had committed fraud. I am not the villain here. I criticized my parents for signing those documents without my consent. My mother still seemed unable to grasp the situation. The rest of the week passed in a daze, but my mother kept repeating that I should have turned a blind eye to keep the family together and maintain peace. I was able to avoid contact with my family, but rumors quickly spread that something was wrong, and relatives began offering their opinions on my response. Some people encouraged me, saying, "You have every right to be angry," while others advised, "You shouldn't make family matters public like this." During this time, my sister started posting aggressively on social media, venting her feelings without directing it at anyone in particular, myself, her friends, or anyone else. I felt uncomfortable with people who, without fully understanding the situation, expressed sympathy and support. They wrote whatever they pleased, about how people only wanted to see things get worse, or that the worst betrayal came from people like that. But I had no intention of engaging. I wasn't interested in a social media battle with my own sister. A few days later, my sister contacted me again. She was still angry, but a bit calmer than before. She told me, "The engagement has officially been called off. I'm breaking up with John, and his family has completely cut off contact with me." She also mentioned that she'd be moving out of the shared house and planned to stay with a friend for a while. However, what she said next truly shocked me. She admitted to me that she had known about the loan. I was stunned. After all her declarations of being uninvolved and knowing nothing about our parents' actions, she finally admitted that she had been aware of it from the beginning. She insisted, "I might have gone about it the wrong way, but I thought everything would be fine once the wedding was over." She added, "I didn't think it would become such a big deal." Furthermore, she mentioned that she hadn't expected the bank to contact me directly. When I asked, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she replied, "I was too scared to say anything." It seemed they had planned to keep everything a secret from me. My sister was worried that if I found out it would jeopardize the wedding. But that worry became a reality. When she said, "I thought he'd marry me once things settled down," I couldn't hide my surprise. However, after he broke things off, she no longer felt the need to keep it a secret. I was filled with guilt over my sister's situation. For the past week, I had been racked with guilt until I learned that she knew about the loan. My sister seemed angry only because her plan had failed, not because her relationship with John had ended. In her anger, she called me a terrible person and immature, to which I responded, "I owe you nothing, and I don't need to return any favors." At that moment, I realized just how damaged our family relationships were, and I was certain there was no going back. After talking with her, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. My family had never truly cared about me. I no longer needed to worry about people who were indifferent toward me. However, that conversation did nothing to lessen the fallout. Though I hadn't been in touch with my parents for some time, they persistently reached out to me over the following weeks. My relationship with my parents only worsened, and numerous relatives called me, trying to convince me to drop the lawsuit. They said, "Aren't they your parents?" and asked, "Isn't there another way?" They seemed willing to overlook the fact that my parents had committed fraud and they thought legal action was unjust, so I ignored their attempts to persuade me. I kept in regular contact with my lawyer, dedicating myself to gathering as much evidence as possible. The more I learned about my parents' actions, the angrier I became. Not only had they forged my signature, but they had also altered financial records and falsified income to secure the loan. Fortunately, the bank respected my perspective and decided I held no responsibility for the loan. Furthermore, my parents found themselves in serious legal trouble, and the family conflict intensified even more. My sister started living with friends, moving out of her apartment completely to start a new life. She blamed me for her breakup with John, and she was also angry at our parents for creating this situation. One day, I received an email from my aunt Emily. She had remained consistently silent on the matter, one of the few who held a neutral stance. I hadn't planned on involving her, but she suggested we talk over coffee. Since Emily wasn't the type to stir up conflict or take sides, I decided to accept her invitation. When we met, she asked about my current situation. Talking with someone who wasn't trying to control me felt comforting, and I was relieved by her concern. After we chatted about recent events for a while, she casually brought up my parents. "Your parents seem very shaken right now," she said, stirring her coffee gently. "They're quite worried about what might happen if this goes to court. But they should have considered that before committing fraud. I suppose they didn't expect you to take things this far," Emily said with a nod. I knew I wanted to avoid being trampled by them again. "I understand how you feel, but what do you really want?" she asked. "Do you want a sincere apology? Or do you want your parents to pay for what they've done?" Her question took me by surprise. "I just wanted to understand your ultimate goal," she said. I realized that I hadn't considered things from that perspective before. Part of me wanted to be completely free of this situation, while another part felt my parents should face the consequences of their actions. "Maybe I just want them to understand that they can't take me lightly ever again," I replied slowly. I wanted to end this, but I hadn't figured out how. My parents have always been lenient with my sister, no matter the situation, and this time it went even further. I can't simply overlook that. Emily nodded slightly. "I completely understand that feeling. But that's not how it looks to your parents. To them, they see you as the source of all the issues." Her words were painful, but I appreciated her honesty. I had sensed that this was how my parents thought too. As she said, they would never admit their mistakes. She hugged me and encouraged me, saying, "Stay strong." Though my parents had always seen me as the family troublemaker, I felt they were the ones who had fractured our family relationships. "This isn't a big deal. You're not in the wrong as a person," she continued. "Even if your parents won't admit their faults, your actions are more sincere than anything they've done to you." After our conversation, I found myself reflecting on what I truly wanted, even though I knew it might place more strain on the family. I began to consider whether to take this to court, or if there might be another way to resolve things. A few days later, my lawyer called to inform me that my parents' attorney had proposed an out-of-court settlement. I felt some anxiety, considering the legal implications. My parents indicated that they were willing to pay a substantial amount of compensation if I agreed to drop the lawsuit. I felt a desire to move forward, but while I was tempted by their offer, I wasn't sure if I should forgive them so easily. The proposed settlement amount was more than sufficient, as it allowed me to avoid a full-blown legal battle while securing a form of financial justice for their actions. So with my lawyer, I carefully reviewed the details. The settlement was enough to relieve my financial worries, giving me the freedom to focus on my business without the economic stress that had burdened me for so long. Yet, in the back of my mind, I couldn't shake the doubt that this might make them believe I had forgiven them. Still, this settlement felt like a kind of victory. In the end, I decided to accept the offer, agreeing to drop the lawsuit, and my parents agreed to pay the compensation. With this, my issues were resolved, but my parents would still face charges from the bank for fraud. It wasn't an ideal outcome, but once the paperwork was completed and everything was officially over, I felt a sense of accomplishment. Having signed everything and closed the lawsuit, I no longer needed to worry about it. However, this decision had definitively altered my relationship with my sister and parents. The family tradition of spending holidays together was gone, and after this resolution, we would no longer gather as a family. While I thought I'd feel relieved, we had now become little more than strangers, bound only by blood and shared memories. My decision ended the legal issues, and the settlement allowed me to start my new business on a positive note, but it was difficult to let go completely. Even weeks after the settlement, the events lingered in my mind, and I had to accept that my relationship with my family would never be the same. They were still alive, yet I felt as though I had lost my sister and parents forever. However, I had no desire to reach out, and I knew they would never contact me either. One evening, while I was working on paperwork in my new office, I received an email from my aunt, Emily, simply asking, "How have you been?" Since we hadn't been in touch since meeting a few weeks ago, I was surprised to see her message. In her email she wrote, "I know it's been difficult, but don't carry everything on your own." Her words had a bigger impact on me than I had expected. Perhaps she had sensed that something was off. I realized just how isolated I had become. Losing friends, distancing myself from my family, it meant a lot that she reached out to me, even though I had no idea what I truly needed to regain a connection with my family. I resolved to stop carrying the burden alone. A few days later, we met again at the same cafe, and when I felt more settled, she looked at me with gentle eyes. "Family isn't always just about blood ties," she said. I was thinking about the settlement, feeling conflicted about accepting the money. I hadn't entirely let go of my resentment toward my parents. Family is something you choose. It's okay to find others who'll be there for you. You don't need to cling to the past, even if your sister or parents aren't close by, she added. Her words resonated deeply. Cutting ties with family, no matter how much pain they'd caused, was like erasing years of seeking my parents' approval, something that had defined much of my life. I thought it was impossible, but as Emily said, I didn't need to stay trapped in the past. Thanks to her, I was able to move forward and start a life where I no longer depended on the people who had hurt me. It wasn't easy, but it wasn't impossible either. Several weeks passed, and I established my own company. Using the settlement money, I hired employees and began taking on challenges that were both beneficial and achievable on my own. As a result, my days have been incredibly fulfilling. One day, as I was heading home from work, I received a call from an unknown number. Work had become my new source of passion, and for the first time in a while, I felt hopeful about the future. But the past appeared before me in an unexpected way. Something seemed intent on keeping me from leaving the past behind, yet I tried to ignore it. The caller was my sister, and she said, "I want to talk with you one more time." I hadn't been in contact with her since her engagement was broken off, so hearing her voice left me feeling unsettled. Unlike before, she spoke in a very calm tone. "I just found out that our parents are selling the house," she continued. "I thought you should know what's happened, too." Her voice sounded a bit somber. "You probably don't want to hear this from me, but our parents are in debt and have run out of money." Her words left me speechless, and I didn't know how to respond. "They lost everything because of what happened with you. But I realized that this is the result of their own actions, and I felt a little bit of guilt," she whispered. "Our parents brought this upon themselves with their fraud. I don't feel responsible for their financial ruin, but I don't know what to do either." I couldn't fully understand what my sister expected from me. She had been living with a friend, but that situation seemed to have soured as well. Was she seeking my sympathy, or perhaps my support? Finally, I managed to reply in a calm tone. I know this is a very tough situation. I don't know if there's anything I can do, but our parents' choices led to this outcome. They misled other people. What did our parents want? She immediately asked in response. I wasn't trying to start an argument. I didn't think our parents were entirely without responsibility. I was surprised by her sensitivity to others' emotions and situations. But I knew where I needed to go. I had rarely seen my sister so unsettled. The sister who had always been spoiled, raised with a strong sense of entitlement, suddenly sounded anxious and confused. You need to realize it yourself. Try to approach it as kindly as you can, I said. For years, I had tried talking with our parents, only to reach the conclusion that I had to walk my own path. Maybe it's time for you to walk your own path, too. After a long silence on the other end of the line, she replied, yes, maybe it is. After that, we barely spoke before ending the call. I wasn't entirely sure how I felt in that moment. A few weeks later, I found out that our parents had sold the house and were planning to move to a smaller one. However, I didn't feel I could solve their financial struggles or my sister's issues either. I didn't contact my parents. I had always wanted their approval, but I felt it was finally time to let that desire go. For the first time, I was able to create something solely for myself. For the first time in my life, I felt free from my parents' expectations and control. The journey hadn't been easy, but I felt a sense of joy in being able to use the settlement money to establish my company. I am no longer someone overlooked, I am a valued individual. I will walk forward, living my life to the fullest. My name is Lana Myers. I am 28 years old, and I have a twin sister named Karen who is 7 minutes younger than me. This is our story. Sometimes, life takes unexpected paths. In our case, it started when we were children. The invisible force of our parents' favoritism shaped our lives. Although we are twins, we are fraternal and look quite different. I resemble our father with single eyelids and narrow eyes. Karen has double eyelids like our mother and her eyes are wide open. She boasts about being a model for a local photo studio when she was a baby. And indeed, she was cute. She was cute enough to make our parents dote on her excessively. My earliest memory is from when I was 5 years old, involving a birthday present. I was forced by our parents to give the cherished teddy bear I received from our grandmother to Karen. At that time, we had just started at a new kindergarten. Our parents insisted that we be placed in the same class and persuaded the principal. Having them in the same class will surely make both of them feel secure. My father's voice was in his usual work mode. As a sales manager, he was skilled at persuading people. Eventually, the principal gave in. Nobody could have imagined that this decision would significantly alter our fates. A few weeks after starting kindergarten, our 5th birthday arrived. Our grandmother gave each of us a teddy bear. Mine was brown and Karen's was white. Both were adorable, but Karen immediately spilled chocolate ice cream on hers. Lana, Karen's teddy bear got dirty. Why don't you swap yours with hers? My mother's voice was kind, but I sensed the hidden command in her words. That's right, Lana. As the older sister, it's only natural for you to give up something for your younger sister. My father's voice carried its usual sternness. I hesitated. It was a precious gift from my grandmother, but Karen was crying loudly. I felt our parents' gazes accusing me. In the end, I let go of the teddy bear. Seeing Karen's smile and our parents' relieved expressions, I felt something definitely change. Since then, an invisible boundary was drawn in our family. Karen became the cherished child and I became the enduring child. This role became more solidified as we grew older. In kindergarten, Karen quickly became popular. Her bright, sociable nature made her adept at making everyone laugh. Meanwhile, I was quiet and introverted. I loved drawing and art time was my favorite. One day, a drawing of mine won first place in a school competition. The teacher called my parents to share the good news. That day, I eagerly awaited my parents' reaction. Lana, I heard you won first place in the drawing contest. That's wonderful. My mother's voice contained a mix of surprise and joy, but it didn't last long. But Karen is upset. She wanted a prize too. My father looked at me sternly. Lana, you are the older sister. "You should think more about Karen. Don't do things that make her sad." I was dumbfounded. Was I not even allowed to be happy about my own achievements? From that day, I began to hide my talents and successes. I learned that staying unnoticed and remaining in Karen's shadow was the secret to keeping peace in the family. When we started elementary school, the differences became even more pronounced. Karen was elected class representative and served as the leader of the cheer squad at the sports festival. Our parents always proudly talked about Karen's achievements. Our Karen is trusted by everyone in her class. Even the teachers rely on her. My mother's voice always carried a boastful tone. Meanwhile, my grades were among the top of the class. But even showing my report card only elicited a lukewarm response from my parents. "Well, Lana is as usual," that was all. One day, our teacher called home. I had ranked first in the state in a national mock exam. My parents were momentarily pleased, but soon they began worrying about Karen. How did Karen do? Upon hearing the teacher's answer, my father's face clouded over. "Lana, you should help Karen more. She's your sister, after all." From that day on, I was told to oversee Karen's studies, but Karen showed no interest at all. "What's the use of studying? I'm going to be a celebrity in the future," she declared. Karen said that as she struck a pose in front of the mirror. Our parents watched her and smiled kindly. "Absolutely, Karen will definitely become a star." My mother's voice was filled with admiration and expectation. As we entered middle school, Karen began to seriously pursue a modeling career. She passed an audition for a local magazine and started to appear in it occasionally. Our parents were thrilled and distributed Karen's photos to all our relatives. I continued to excel academically and was highly regarded by my teachers, but at home, I remained in the background. Our parents' conversations always revolved around Karen. I was only mentioned when comparing me to Karen. "Lana is plain compared to Karen. But she's good at studying, so her future is secure." I heard such conversations over and over again. When we entered high school, the gap widened even more. Karen became a cheerleader and attracted attention throughout the school. I focused on my studies and even became the student council president. However, our parents' interest was solely directed towards Karen's cheerleading competitions. "Lana, aren't you going to watch Karen's game?" My mother's voice always had a hint of reproach. "I have to study." My response was always the same. The truth was, it was painful to watch Karen bask in the spotlight. Amidst this, I found my future dream. I wanted to become a financial analyst. I manipulated numbers and analyzed the value of companies. There, I found the fairness I was looking for. Numbers don't lie. I was drawn to a world where one is evaluated solely on their abilities. When I shared this dream with my parents, their reaction was unexpected. "That sounds like something Lana would be good at." My mother's voice had a rare affirmative tone. "You will probably do well." My father also unexpectedly offered words of recognition. In that moment, a small hope sprouted within me. Maybe my parents did recognize my worth after all. I thought that way. Eventually, the time to go to college came. I attended a prestigious university out of state on a scholarship. I planned to study financial expertise in the economics department. Meanwhile, Karen enrolled in a local university. She would study acting in the College of Arts. Karen will surely succeed as an actress. My parents' expectations were still squarely focused on Karen. When college life began, I felt freedom for the first time. Living away from home, I discovered the joy of making my own decisions about my life. Classes were enjoyable, I made new friends, and I started a part-time job. On the other hand, Karen's college life was not going smoothly. Right after enrolling, she began saying that the university was not a good fit for her. "Everyone is too serious here. It's boring for me," she complained. Karen began skipping classes, and within a year, she had dropped out of university. "I'll take some time at home to find the right path for myself," Karen said as she moved back in with our parents. While they were worried, they accepted Karen's decision. "We need to support Karen until her talents bloom," my mother said, comforting Karen. From then on, I gradually reduced my contact with home. Whenever I called, the conversation always revolved around Karen. They hardly asked about my studies or life. After graduating from university, I secured a job at the financial institution I had always wanted to work for. My starting salary wasn't very high, but I found joy in being able to support myself with my own efforts. The job was tough but fulfilling. Facing numbers and analyzing the realities of businesses provided the fairness I sought. Meanwhile, Karen was still doted on by her parents and lived as a NEET under the guise of helping with household chores. Her life was mostly sedentary, eating her favorite foods and lounging around, which led her to gain a significant amount of weight, losing the cuteness of her childhood. However, to our parents, who had become completely indulgent, her physique seemed irrelevant. Regardless of the past, when they favored Karen for her cuter appearance over mine. One day, amidst these ongoing circumstances, I suddenly received a call from Karen. "Lana, I want you to give our parents a trip." I was puzzled by her sudden request. "What? Why all of a sudden?" "It's for their 30th wedding anniversary. I heard that the son of Mr. Lane next door gave his parents a trip." Mom seemed envious when she heard about it. I couldn't help but smile wryly as Karen explained, typical of our mother. She probably doesn't want to be outdone by the Lanes. But we haven't done anything for them before, right? Not for their 10th or 20th anniversaries. That doesn't matter. It's never too late to start. Karen's voice carried her usual confidence. "So, what do you want me to do?" The answer was as expected. "I want you to put up the money. I'll handle all the reservations. Then it can be a gift from both of us." Karen doesn't work, so the allowance she gets from our parents is her only source of income, and she spends all of it. So she has no savings. For a moment, I thought about refusing, but the complex feelings I had for our parents swayed my heart. Indeed, they favored Karen over me, but still, they raised me. Perhaps I should do at least the minimum to honor them. "Okay, I'll set the budget, but I'll leave the rest to you." Karen happily hung up. Afterward, I got caught up in work and completely forgot about the trip for our parents. Then, 2 weeks later, suddenly, I received the news. Our parents had died in a traffic accident while on their trip. I never wanted such a farewell, and I regret contributing financially. Karen repeatedly blamed me for the tragedy. While listening to her cry and scream over the phone, I was oddly calm. It was as if my emotions had frozen. "Lana, what are we going to do?" Karen's voice was broken. "Stay calm. I'm coming home right now. I'll handle everything." After hanging up, I immediately contacted my boss and applied for emergency leave. Then I set off for my childhood home. When I arrived, relatives had already gathered there. Karen was being cradled by one of our mother's friends, crying like a small child. I entered the house quietly and navigated through the bustling relatives to the second floor, to my old room. Stepping into the room, nostalgia hit me, but so did a sense of dissonance. A decade-old poster still hung on the wall, but unfamiliar clothes were carelessly thrown on the bed. Karen had been using it as her room. Taking a deep breath, I shifted my focus. This was no time for sentimentality. There was much to be done. A few days later, the funeral took place. I managed the ceremony methodically. Karen broke down crying, nearly fainting several times. Relatives and our parents' friends were focused on comforting Karen, barely noticing me. After the funeral ended and the relatives had left, Karen and I were alone for the first time. "Lana, what are we going to do now?" Karen asked anxiously. "First, we need to check our parents' will," I replied calmly. "Then, there's the mortgage and insurance paperwork to handle. I'll take care of everything." "Stop being so cold." Karen suddenly screamed. "Mom and Dad are dead. Don't you feel sad at all? It's because of the unnecessary thing you did that Mom and Dad died. Take responsibility for it." Responsibility? Am I not doing enough? Handling all the funeral preparations alone? Could she possibly be referring to the future? At that moment, a chill ran through me. With our parents gone, Karen might intend to depend on me from now on. I was momentarily at a loss for words. True, I hadn't shed a single tear, but that was. "Getting emotional won't solve anything," I said quietly. "We need to deal with reality now." Karen stormed out of the room angrily. The next day, I found the will in Dad's study. It contained something shocking. Although I am healthy and cannot imagine passing away, if I do, half of my estate will go to Mom, and of the remaining, 80% will go to Karen, because she has always been our support, and the rest will go to Lana. I couldn't believe my eyes. Why such an unfair distribution? Just then, Karen entered the room. "What are you looking at?" I handed her the will silently. As she read it, her expression brightened, just as I thought. Mom and Dad really did think about me. In response to her words, emotions I had long suppressed suddenly overflowed. "Thinking about you. Karen, you need to wake up. Our parents coddled you so much that you've become an adult who can't do anything on your own." Karen looked shocked. "What? Why would you say something so mean? Are you jealous?" "Jealous? Don't make me laugh," I scoffed. "I've carved out my life with my own efforts. Meanwhile, you've lived off our parents even at 28. Even this distribution of the inheritance is probably because they knew you couldn't manage on your own. That's cruel." Karen's eyes welled up with tears. "Are you really my sister?" Her words deeply hurt me. Without a pause, Karen continued, "You're going to live on your own anyway, so just renounce the inheritance. I have no intention of working. I need it for my living expenses. Now that Mom is gone, I should inherit everything. You have a job, so you don't need the inheritance, right? And by the way, it wasn't a gift from both of us. If you hadn't contributed money, I wouldn't have been able to book it, and Mom and Dad wouldn't have gone on that trip. I'm not giving you a single dollar. I was shaken, but I tried to remain composed. We are related by blood, but we have nothing else in common. Do whatever you want with the inheritance. I'm going back to my own life. If I renounce the inheritance, I will never, under any circumstances, take care of you again. If you're okay with that, then I'll renounce it. Saying this, I left the room. The following weeks felt like a nightmare. Handling the inheritance process, sorting out the house, confirming our parents' debts. I had to do it all alone. As I was nearing the completion of these tasks, nearly 3 months had passed. Karen's call came as a surprise. Did you know we're not getting any inheritance money, and there's no life insurance payout either? Dad was driving under the influence, I explained succinctly. So what Karen seemed unable to grasp the significance. What she didn't understand was that our parents had driven to their vacation destination in their own car, and the police investigation revealed that our father had stopped at a distillery along the way. Despite tasting a significant amount of alcohol, he had continued to drive. Dad always thought that as long as his actions didn't get exposed, they weren't wrong. He indulged himself with the belief that everything was fine as long as he wasn't caught and no accidents occurred, a dangerous overconfidence. This accident was entirely Dad's fault. But as his daughter, I felt conflicted. But that's all in the past now. In cases of drunk driving, there are clauses that exempt the insurance company from paying out, because it's considered a preventable, reckless act. Therefore, not only life insurance but also collision damage waiver and vehicle insurance payments were not applicable. After I explained this carefully, Karen shrieked in disbelief. She had assumed a substantial insurance payout was assured, and was visibly shocked to learn otherwise. Originally, the beneficiary of the insurance was not me but Karen, who was the favored child. This doesn't concern me. And what's this compensation about? She demanded further. It's because he hit a utility pole in the self-induced accident. I explained. Utility poles are public property, and when damaged in a traffic accident, the actual cost of repairs is billed to those responsible. But $80,000 for a concrete pole. That's ridiculous. It's just a pole, and it's not even broken, right? Karen argued. Actually, it caused a power outage. If anything, that's a low estimate, I explained. Not only had the pole been damaged, but the power lines were severed, causing a major hotel and several residences downstream to lose electricity. Upon hearing this, Karen became hysterical. That's a lie. It must be a lie, she screamed. Lana, you must have hidden it all, trying to steal the inheritance from me. I shook my head in disbelief. Karen, face the reality. Our parents were drowning in debt. They kept borrowing more to support your extravagant lifestyle. Karen broke down crying. So what am I supposed to do now? At that moment, I made my decision. I could no longer take care of Karen. She was 28 and needed to carve out her own path. Karen, listen, I said calmly. We need to go our separate ways. You need to forge your own life with your own efforts. I can't look after you anymore. Karen looked at me in shock. What are you talking about? We're sisters. Aren't we supposed to help each other? No, that's not how it is, I said firmly. We might be twins, but we're living separate lives now. You need to become independent. Karen became angry. You're so cold. How can you be so cold? Our parents just died, and you choose this time to abandon me. I took a deep breath, steadying myself against her accusations and the emotional turmoil swirling between us. Karen, this isn't abandonment. I'm treating you as an adult. You aren't a child anymore, are you? Despite her crying over the phone, I ended the call. Since that day, my relationship with Karen completely cooled off. She stayed at the family home, and I returned to my apartment. Occasionally, relatives would contact me, updating me on Karen's situation. With no savings left and no one else to rely on, she had reluctantly started to look for part-time jobs and modeling work. I focused on my career. My path as a financial analyst was successful, and I earned promotions. As I adapted to my new life, memories of my parents and my conflicts with Karen gradually faded. While searching for necessary documents one day, I found a bank book registered in my name. Alongside it was a letter from our grandmother. It seemed it was not my parents, but my grandmother who had left these for me. My grandmother had not been pleased with how our parents favored Karen, and she had admonished them multiple times. Because of this, she gradually became estranged from them and sadly passed away alone in a facility. The letter was already opened and stored with my parents' valuables, suggesting they had not intended to give it to me. However, this was evidence of my grandmother's affection for me and was rightfully mine. 5 years have passed since then. One day, out of the blue, Karen called me. Lana, I need to talk to you. Her voice was completely different from 5 years ago. It was calm and matured. "Is something wrong?" I asked cautiously. "I'm sorry," Karen's voice trembled. "About everything 5 years ago, you were right. I finally realized that." I was speechless. In these 5 years, I've learned so much. The hardships of work, the importance of money, what it means to be independent. And I've come to understand your feelings too, Karen continued. "Lana, you've been enduring all along. Because of my selfishness, you gave up so much, didn't you? I'm truly sorry." Tears spilled from my eyes for the first time. "Karen, Lana, can we start over?" This time as real sisters. Something melted inside me at her words. "Yes, we can," I smiled. "Let's start over." After we hung up, I stared out the window. The sky was clear and blue, hinting at a new beginning. This was the start of a new story for Karen and me, and a new chapter in our own lives as well. After overcoming years of conflict, perhaps we had finally become true sisters. What the future held was uncertain, but I knew I would never feel alone again. And for the first time, I truly felt happy. Months after reconciling with Karen, I made a significant decision. I resigned from the financial institution where I had worked for many years and decided to work independently as a financial planner. My decision was greatly influenced by my reconciliation with Karen. Through our conversations, I found an opportunity to reflect on my own life. Indeed, my work as a financial analyst was fulfilling. However, what I really wanted was to assist individuals in achieving their dreams and goals. "Lana, are you sure about this?" Karen asked worriedly. "You just got promoted." Then, I smiled. "Yes, it's fine. I see this as an opportunity. I can use my experience to do what I really want to do." Karen thought for a moment, then smiled warmly. "I see. That's very like you, Lana. But let me know if there's anything I can help with." Her words warmed my heart. The old Karen would have been too overwhelmed with her own issues to offer such consideration. The first year of being independent was tougher than I had imagined. I struggled to find clients and my income was unstable. Yet, facing each client individually and being able to support their lives brought me immense satisfaction. Then, an astonishing request came my way. "Lana, do financial planners also consult with celebrities?" Karen asked with interest one day. "Yes, of course. But I don't have such high-profile clients," I replied jokingly. Karen hesitated a bit before saying, "Actually, I have a friend who's a young actress. She's recently become popular, but she's struggling with managing her money." I was surprised. "Really? But isn't she with a major agency?" Karen shook her head. "No, she's independent. So she has to handle all the little details herself." Eventually I met with the actress, Audrey. She was indeed young and beautiful, but there was a weariness in her eyes. "I'm really sorry for this sudden consultation," Audrey said. "Not at all." I smiled. "I'm here to help if I can." Audrey's concerns were more serious than I had imagined. Though her income had increased due to her recent success, she had no knowledge about managing taxes or investing for the future. "I've only ever focused on acting," Audrey said shyly. "But I know I can't continue like this." Hearing this, I was reminded of the old Karen, chasing dreams without facing reality. "It's okay." I took Audrey's hand. "Let's work hard together." Over the next few months, I developed a financial plan for Audrey from scratch. From the basics of taxes to long-term asset management, I explained everything carefully. Audrey was a quick learner. "Lana, thank you so much. I didn't realize how much there was to learn." Her words filled me with great joy. I was making a tangible contribution to someone's life. This was exactly what I had been seeking. The work I did with Audrey began to attract attention, and gradually I started gaining more clients from the entertainment industry. My business developed in unexpected directions. One day, Karen burst into my office, visibly excited. "Lana, it's incredible. We've got an interview request from a TV station." I was so surprised that I stood up from my chair. "What do you mean?" Karen explained, breathless. "You're being called the Alley of Celebrities. They want to feature you as a financial planner who supports the financial independence of young entertainers." I was perplexed. "But I'm just doing my job. There's nothing special about that." Karen shook her head. "No, Lana, you are special. Not many can understand the complex income structures of celebrities and give advice while respecting their dreams." Her words made me think deeply. Indeed, the financial situations of celebrities are unique. Unstable incomes, sudden large payments, complex taxes, and above all, the importance of pursuing dreams. Perhaps through my experiences and my relationship with Karen, I had come to deeply understand these. In the end, I decided to accept the TV interview. It wasn't just to promote my own work, but also as an opportunity to convey the importance of financial independence to young entertainers. On the day of the interview, I stood in front of the camera, nervous. "Ms. Myers, why did you decide to become a financial planner specializing in celebrities?" the interviewer asked. I paused to think before answering. "Actually, I have a twin sister. She once aspired to be in the entertainment industry too, but she lacked financial knowledge." I spoke candidly about my past with Karen, our relationship with our parents, and the process of reconciliation. While I omitted the finer details, I explained how these experiences connected to my current work. Pursuing dreams is wonderful. However, to sustain those dreams long-term, a solid financial foundation is necessary. I aim to support celebrities in achieving both, I explained. When the interview concluded, the staff applauded. The director approached me and said, "Thank you for such an inspiring story. It will surely resonate with many people." After the broadcast, the response was greater than anticipated. Not only did numerous young entertainers reach out for advice, but general viewers also shared how the interview helped them appreciate the importance of balancing dreams and reality. That evening, Karen came to my apartment. "Lana, I watched it," she said with sparkling eyes. "It was wonderful." I smiled, a bit embarrassed. "Thank you. But I could only tell that story because you were there with me." Karen nodded quietly. "Lana, sometimes I still think about it. If I had been more realistic back then, maybe I could have become a famous actress by now," she mused. I looked at her, surprised, but saw no regret in her expression. But Karen continued, "I am satisfied with my life now. That setback allowed me to truly confront who I am, find the job I have now, and more importantly, it made us true sisters." I hugged Karen spontaneously. "Karen." At that moment, I felt that we had truly reconciled. The wounds of the past might not be completely healed, but we had found closure and a new beginning together. But we could use that as nourishment to grow together. I was sure of it. Looking outside the window, the full moon was shining brightly. Its light seemed to bless our new life. What the future holds, I do not know, but I will never feel lonely again. Having a sister who understands and supports me is enough to make me feel content. And I whispered from the bottom of my heart, "Thank you, Karen. And thank you, Mom and Dad." My feelings towards our parents are still complex, not fully reconciled, but it was because of them that I am who I am today. For the first time, I felt I could truly accept that fact. Bathed in the moonlight, Karen and I sat quietly together. A new morning awaits us. On a cold February morning, Lindsay Baker woke up before her alarm clock rang. The digital clock showed 5:30 a.m. Under the still dark sky, the streets of Brooklyn Heights were enveloped in silence. Lindsay quietly got up and opened the curtains. Beyond the window, the high-rise buildings of Manhattan emerged, shrouded in the morning mist. As she approached her vanity, a family photo framed in silver caught her eye. It was taken last Christmas at her parents' house. In the center stood her sister, Candace Wagner, with their parents proudly looking on. Lindsay stood at the edge, her usual modest smile on her face. From a young age, Lindsay had watched her parents work tirelessly. Her father worked in the accounting department of a mid-sized company, and her mother juggled a part-time job at a supermarket while raising their two daughters. They were never wealthy, but it was a normally happy family. That changed when Candace became a successful investment analyst. Her sister's glamorous career and high income captivated their parents, and gradually, the family dynamics began to distort. They became more enamored with Candace's celebrity lifestyle than Lindsay's ordinary life. "Candace is our pride," her father would always say at weekend family gatherings. Even with tired eyes from his accounting job, he proudly talked about his daughter's success. Her mother, too, made it a daily habit to talk about Candace to acquaintances in between her shifts at the supermarket checkout. Candace had made a name for herself as a dazzling investment analyst and became one of the most watched young professionals on Wall Street. She graced the covers of magazines and frequently appeared on television shows, with her parents watching with boundless pride. At yesterday's family dinner, the conversation was, as always, centered around Candace. "Candace, you got nominated for Analyst of the Year," her mother said with sparkling eyes. "We're really proud of you." Meanwhile, Lindsay's steady efforts seldom made it into the conversations. She had graduated top of her class from law school, built a career at a law firm, and worked hard, yet her accomplishments seemed almost invisible to her parents. "Let's give it our all today," she told herself in the mirror. This habit started when she began living separately from her husband, Michael. He frequently traveled abroad for work, leaving Lindsay to parent their son mostly on her own, and these words of encouragement had become essential, especially today, as she had an important meeting with a client. As she headed to the living room, the seedlings of thyme and rose by the window caught her eye, bringing a small sense of relief to her busy days. "Mummy, good morning," said Aaron, rubbing his sleepy eyes in his pajamas. Lindsay hugged her son and kissed his soft hair. "Good morning, Aaron. You're up early today." While making toast and pouring orange juice in the kitchen, Lindsay thought about the evening. Michael had been on a business trip to China since last week and was due to return later tonight. She planned to use the extended daycare hours because her review of an important contract was likely to run late. "Aaron, you'll have to stay at daycare a bit longer today. Is that okay?" "Yeah, the teacher always tells fun stories." Her son's eyes lit up. "That's good. Mommy will come to pick you up as soon as she's done with work." After getting Aaron ready and dropping him off at daycare, Lindsay headed to her office in Manhattan. Checking her phone, she saw a message from Michael. "The meeting in Beijing is running long. I'll definitely be back tomorrow morning. Say hello to Aaron for me." Upon arriving at the office, many of her colleagues had already started their day. It looked to be a busy day. Her sister might be appearing on a morning TV show by now. Lindsay let out a loud sigh and turned her attention to the contract. Another long day was beginning. She reminded herself, she might not be the perfect mother, she might not be the glamorous career woman, but she had to do her best with what she was capable of. That was her way of living. At 2 p.m., the phone on Lindsay's desk rang. It was from the daycare. "Ms. Baker, we're sorry to inform you that there has been an outbreak of influenza at the center. We have to cancel the extended care for today." Lindsay gasped. She had the final review of an important contract today. Leaving early was out of the question. Understood. She hung up and immediately grabbed her smartphone. She tried contacting her usual babysitter, Patty, but she was down with a cold as well. It seems her parents were attending a friend's wedding in the countryside, and Michael was on a business trip to Beijing. Lindsay could not possibly refuse the important task assigned to her by her senior partner at such a late stage. Just then, her cell phone rang. It was from Candace. "Hey Lindsay, I heard from our parents. Sounds like you're having a tough time." "Yes. But I'll manage somehow. I can look after your son for you." Candace's voice sounded bright and kind. "That's kind of you, Candace, but today. There is the Analyst of the Year award ceremony tonight, but I'm totally free until then. What about after that?" "Don't worry. My housekeeper, Diane, will be there. She's experienced with children. She used to look after the kids of a top executive at an investment bank." Lindsay pondered for a moment. Her relationship with Candace had never been exactly warm, but they were still real sisters. Additionally, she had heard good things about her sister's housekeeper. And above all, she had no other options. "Are you sure it's okay?" "Of course. I'm taking care of my beloved nephew after all. I've already talked to Diane and she agreed." While gazing at the calendar, Lindsay slowly responded, "Okay, I understand, but contact me immediately if anything happens. Leave it to me. I'll even buy some of his favorite snacks." Even after hanging up, a small worry lingered in Lindsay's heart. But perhaps it was even safer than extended daycare if her own sister was watching him with a housekeeper in tow. She reassured herself. At that moment, Lindsay could not have imagined that this decision would lead to irrevocable consequences. As dusk approached, the Manhattan sky began to be covered with heavy rain clouds. The clock had just passed 7 p.m. "Ms. Baker, please give the final review of this and a contract." A young associate approached Lindsay's desk with a thick file. "I'm sorry, I can't today." Lindsay quickly packed her laptop into her bag as she spoke. "I've left my son with my sister. I'll review it first thing tomorrow morning. But the client wants it done today." "I understand. I'll look at it once I get home. so send it by email." Lindsay stood up and grabbed her coat. As she stepped into the elevator, she checked her phone. She had sent a message in the evening asking for a quick call before heading to the Analyst of the Year ceremony. There was still no reply from Candace. When she reached the entrance lobby, light rain had begun to fall. While opening her umbrella, Lindsay checked her phone again. This time it was a message from Michael. "The flight is on schedule. I'll be home tomorrow morning. Kiss Aaron for me. Don't worry." Her steps hurried towards the subway station, echoing on the rain-soaked sidewalk. At this hour, the streets were completely quiet. As Lindsay walked briskly, she called Candace again. "Please, pick up." The ringing echoed emptily. "I wonder if Aaron is okay." As she approached a crosswalk, she tilted her umbrella slightly to check the signal on the opposite lane. In that moment of distraction, everything changed. A loud crash, a blinding light, and a violent impact. A car sped from the left, its tires sliding on the wet road. There was no time to scream. Lindsay's body was flung into the air and into the darkness. As consciousness faded, her son's face flashed in her mind. Aaron. Then everything sank into darkness. A white ceiling, the smell of disinfectant, the regular beeping of machines. As consciousness returned bit by bit, these sensations gradually sharpened. "Ms. Baker, can you hear me?" Her vision slowly focused. A female doctor in a white coat looked down at her with concern. "You were in an accident and have been brought to Brooklyn Methodist Hospital. You have been unconscious for about 2 hours. Attempting to move, a sharp pain coursed through her body. Lindsay's right leg was immobilized in a heavy cast, and the pain in her chest and abdomen made breathing difficult. Her face appeared to be lacerated, wrapped in bandages. Surgery is necessary. We've received the results of your X-rays and blood tests. You have multiple fractures and there is a possibility of internal bleeding. The surgery is scheduled to last about 3 hours. I need my cell phone. I have to contact my son." At that moment, a noisy voice came from the hallway. "Mommy. Where is Mommy?" Lindsay's heart raced. There was no mistaking that voice. A nurse hurried into the room. "A boy about 5 years old has come to the reception desk. He says he's your son. But my sister was supposed to." Her words trailed off as the door burst open and Aaron rushed in. He was still in his pajamas, wearing only one shoe, his cheeks streaked with tears and his small body shivering from the cold. "Mommy." He ran to the bedside and grasped Lindsay's hand, his small hand ice cold. "I was scared." There was no one at home. A chill ran through Lindsay's entire body. "Aaron, where's Aunt Candace?" "Auntie put on a pretty dress and left." His voice trembled. "I was playing in the yard and then she was gone. I tried to call you but couldn't get through. So I thought I'd go to your office." I walked. In that moment, anger and fear pierced through Lindsay. Candace had left a 5-year-old child alone at home to go to an awards ceremony, on a winter night no less. Nurse Tiffany immediately called the police. "There's a possibility of child neglect. We need an investigation right away." Lindsay hugged her son tightly. The needle from the IV caused a sharp pain in her arm, but it didn't matter. She just wanted to feel the warmth of his small body. And she resolved then and there, never again would she allow anyone to put her son in danger. For the remaining 30 minutes before the police arrived, Lindsay held Aaron, battling various emotions. Gently stroking her son's hair, she asked quietly, "Aaron, can you tell me everything from the beginning? What happened after Aunt Candace came to get you?" Clinging to his mother's hospital gown, Aaron began to speak in a trembling voice. "Auntie came to pick me up and at first it was fun. She taught me about space and a new game. But in the evening she suddenly started rushing. She said she had a very important appointment and quickly changed into a beautiful dress." At that moment, there was a knock on the hospital room's door, and 2 police officers entered. "Ms. Baker, I am Deputy Chief Hansen. May I speak with you?" Deputy Chief Hansen opened his notebook and began to ask quietly, Ms. Candace Wagner is your sister, correct? Yes. She was supposed to take care of my son tonight because I was working late. Lindsay struggled to maintain her composure. What time did you leave your son with her? 4 p.m. She was supposed to pick him up directly from daycare. Deputy Chief Hansen made a note and continued with his questions. Did you contact your sister afterward? I tried to call her several times but couldn't reach her. She was supposed to be attending the Analyst of the Year ceremony on Wall Street tonight. Just then, another officer entered the room. We've been able to confirm the surveillance footage. He held a tablet in his hand. The screen showed the front of Candace's house, time-stamped at 6:15 p.m. Candace was seen leaving the house in a luxurious evening gown. She appeared to be in a hurry. And the critical footage. Aaron playing in the backyard, noticed by Candace, who, without turning back, got into a luxury car and drove away. This is... Words failed her. Temperatures were near freezing. Deputy Chief Hansen continued carefully. Leaving a 5-year-old outside constitutes a clear danger to life. This is a clear case of child neglect. Leaving a child alone at home, especially on a winter night. This is a very serious matter. Just then, noisy voices began outside the hospital room. Where is my daughter? Lindsay. It was her mother's voice. Then her father's voice followed. Why are the police getting involved? The moment Lindsay's parents entered the hospital room, the atmosphere seemed to freeze. Her mother's makeup was hastily applied, and her father's face was contorted with anger. What happened? I heard Candace might be arrested. Her mother's voice was frantic. While Deputy Chief Hansen explained the situation, Lindsay observed her parents' expressions. As the explanation progressed, the color drained from her mother's face. Her father looked incredulous. This must be some kind of mistake. Her mother insisted desperately. Candace would never do such a thing. There must be a reason. A reason. Lindsay's voice was as cold as ice. A reason to leave a 5-year-old alone on a winter night. But the awards ceremony was crucial for her career. Her career? Aaron came looking for me alone, freezing. What if he had been in an accident? What if he had been kidnapped? Her father finally spoke. Calm down, Lindsay. This is a family matter. There's no need to involve the police. No, Dad. This is a crime. Candace broke the law. And I will take all necessary legal actions to ensure my son's safety. Just then, a nurse hurried in. Please turn on the TV. The hospital room's TV was turned on, and a news bulletin began to play. Breaking news. Major disruption at tonight's Analyst of the Year Awards ceremony. Nominee Candace Wagner was discovered to have left her 5-year-old nephew at home alone to attend. The ceremony has been interrupted, and the police are conducting interviews. On the screen, Candace was shown being led away by the police. Still in her luxurious evening gown, she covered her face with both hands. The room was enveloped in a heavy silence. Aaron buried his face in his mother's chest, trembling slightly. Gently stroking her son's back, Lindsay's resolve hardened. There was no going back. This was no longer just a family issue. It was about her son's safety and justice. The morning after the surgery, Michael, who had returned as scheduled from abroad, rushed to the hospital after learning about the accident. After explaining the situation, Michael took Aaron home. The father and son, reunited after a long time, embraced for a long while. Unbelievable, Michael said after putting his son to bed and returning to the hospital room. I can't believe Candace would do such a thing. Lindsay, lying in her hospital bed, quietly nodded in agreement. The cast on her right leg was heavy, and although the physical pain had not fully subsided, her mind was already on the next steps. Just then, a nurse arrived for the morning rounds. Ms. Baker, you have a visitor. The hospital room door opened, and a woman in a suit entered. Hello, I'm Kathy Owen. I'm a social worker from Child Protective Services, Kathy said as she sat down. I'm here regarding the Candace Wagner case. A detailed investigation has begun. Kathy opened her file and began to explain. security camera footage, weather data, records of your accident, and above all, the fact that Aaron came to the hospital alone. All these are evidence of child neglect. Additionally, the police investigation had uncovered exchanges on Messenger between Candace and her best friend Nicole, who worked at the same investment firm. "Hey Nicole, what do you think of my speech for tonight's ceremony? It's perfect. Especially the part about being a woman analyst who values family. It'll really sell. Right. I'm babysitting my niece now. It's all part of the act. You're not really going to take care of him, are you?" "Of course not. I'll just let him play for a while and then leave him with the housekeeper. Tonight's my night. I can't miss this opportunity." "Did you arrange for the housekeeper?" "Oh, I forgot. I told my sister I had arranged it. But it's too late now. I have to rush. The kid can wait. Now is my moment." As Lindsay read these messages, she felt a chill at her sister's calculated actions. Her son was just a prop in Candace's climb up the corporate ladder. However, her plans backfired when she forgot to arrange for the housekeeper. Just then, the hospital room door opened again. Her parents entered. Her mother's eyes were swollen from crying, and her father looked utterly exhausted. "Lindsay, please. Pay for Candace's bail. You can afford it. Her life will be ruined otherwise." Lindsay sighed. Her parents were ordinary salaried workers. They could not afford Candace's bail. Yet, they were begging Lindsay to save their daughter. As if Lindsay's savings were their own property. "Are you joking?" "Mom, Aaron's life was put in danger." "But isn't it a family matter? Family issues should be resolved within the family." "Yes," Lindsay replied slowly. "But Dad, what exactly is family? Don't you think Candace crossed a line when she abandoned my son?" Kathy continued to explain quietly. "The prosecution has already decided to proceed with charges. The question is whether you will testify." The room fell silent. All eyes were on Lindsay. "Lindsay," her mother pleaded. "Your sister. Are you really going to send your sister, who you grew up with, to prison?" Lindsay closed her eyes. Memories of their childhood flashed before her eyes. Indeed, there were happy moments spent with Candace. But at the same time, she recalled the days when her sister was always prioritized and her own efforts went unrecognized. And above all, the image of her son desperately searching for his mother on that cold night. "Mom, I'm a mother too. There's nothing more important than a child's safety. Candace risked a 5-year-old's life for her career. That's unforgivable. But what if Aaron had been in an accident? What if he had been kidnapped? What if he had frozen to death? Thinking about these what-ifs keep me up at night." Michael took his wife's hand. He had been silent, but his expression showed he supported his wife's decision. "You've always coddled Candace. Talented, promising future, you'd say. But talent should come with responsibility. I cannot forgive someone who prioritizes their career over basic human morals." Kathy closed the file. "So, will you testify?" "Yes." Lindsay's voice was firm, filled with resolve. "I'll tell everything. For the safety of my son, and for the safety of other children." Her father's voice trembled with anger. "Are you satisfied? Destroying the family." "No, Dad. It wasn't me who destroyed the family. It was Candace's selfish actions and your years of enabling that behavior. I am trying to create a new form of family." Her mother left the room crying, followed by her father. Left behind, Lindsay, Michael, and Kathy began to discuss the upcoming legal proceedings. Lindsay knew her decision was the right one. It might not be the easy path, but it was the path she needed to take as a mother and as a person. Michael placed his hand on her shoulder. "It will be okay. We'll get through this together." Grateful for the warmth of his hand, Lindsay steeled herself for the new life that was beginning. A life based on truth, justice, and genuine affection. She had finally found her path. In a courtroom bathed in spring sunlight, the judge pronounced the sentence with a solemn voice. "Candace Wagner is hereby sentenced to 2 years in prison for child neglect." Candace collapsed into her seat, and her mother let out a scream-like cry. Her father stood dumbfounded. The defendant left a 5-year-old child in a dangerous situation, forcing the child to act alone and exposing him to significant risk. The defendant's career and social status will not influence the sentencing. The judge's words echoed heavily in the courtroom. The trial that lasted 3 months had finally come to an end. Michael gently squeezed her hand, and Aaron slept on his lap. The once glamorous analyst's facade was gone from Candace. Her designer suits were replaced with prison uniforms, and her perfect makeup was marred by tears. A week later, the local paper reported the collapse of the investment firm where Candace had worked. An internal investigation triggered by her case revealed numerous fraudulent transactions. Candace's brilliant career had been nothing but a castle built on sand. Her parents were also on a downward spiral. A neighbor mentioned that her father had been demoted at work. He was moved from a managerial position in the accounting department to a general staff role, reportedly due to the negative impact his daughter's case had on the company's image. His salary was cut by nearly 40%. A former colleague of her mother reported that she had been moved from her cashier's job at the supermarket to an early morning cleaning crew, triggered by customer complaints. Additionally, she had started part-time work at another supermarket in the afternoon, juggling 2 jobs. The parents had also sold the condo where they had lived for 35 years. The elderly couple was slowly losing their retirement savings. Meanwhile, Lindsay's new life was taking shape, steadily forming a new reality. The new house in Park Slope was filled with family smiles. In the spacious backyard, Aaron played energetically, and on weekends, he enjoyed gardening with Michael. At the office, Lindsay's reputation was soaring. Her sincere approach to child rights protection had earned the trust of many clients. The newly established Working Parents Support Team was receiving overwhelming support from working parents. One day, she unexpectedly ran into her mother at the supermarket. Her mother was scouring the discount section, her expression weary. "Lindsay." Her mother tried to speak, but Lindsay walked past without a word. Behind her, she could hear her mother's sobbing. On another holiday, she spotted her father working as a cleaning staff member at a high-end department store. He was bent over, wiping the floor, his body aged. Lindsay quickly averted her eyes to avoid making eye contact. Letters had arrived from Candace in prison several times. "Lindsay, I was wrong. Please forgive me." However, Lindsay threw all those letters away. The past should be left as the past, with a clear boundary set. At a housewarming party in their new home, neighbors gathered. The scent of barbecue grilling filled the yard, and children's laughter echoed. "What a wonderful family," said Helen from next door. "You all look truly happy." Lindsay smiled in response. "Yes, we have everything we need now." As dusk fell, Lindsay reflected quietly while overlooking the city from the balcony. Candace was in prison, her parents faced bankruptcy in their old age, and their once affluent lifestyle had completely vanished. Ironically, she, who had always been treated as second best and overlooked, was the only one who had grasped certain happiness. It was a modest happiness, but it was solid, based on love and trust. "Mommy, look." Aaron called from the garden. The first sprouts had emerged in the small vegetable garden he had made with Michael. Watching her son's proud face, Lindsay thought to herself, true success is not about flashy achievements or social status. It's about building sure happiness step by step with the people you love. Accepting the past as the past, she continued to look forward and walk on. That is the true victory. Seattle's autumn mornings always begin with a drizzle. At a corner in downtown, shaded by the Smith Tower, the silver sign of Lindsay Wang's law office gleamed in the morning sun. After a decade of independence from a major law firm, Lindsay had built her own fortress over 10 years. At 43, Lindsay sat at her desk by the window on the 15th floor, reviewing documents for a new litigation case. Her office walls were adorned with her Stanford Law School diploma and numerous awards, including the Washington State Women Entrepreneur Award. Beside these, There was a family photo of her 12-year-old daughter Madison and her husband Thomas, who was currently on a work assignment in Hong Kong. In the sunlit photo, the three of them were smiling happily. "Mizu Wang, here are the documents for the 9 a.m. client meeting," said Olivia, her secretary, bringing in perfectly organized documents. Her meticulous work had earned Lindsay's deep trust. "Thank you. By the way, did you hear anything from Madison's school?" "Yes, they've changed the choir practice schedule. I forwarded the email to you." Lindsay checked the time. It was only 8:15 a.m. Madison would be on the school bus by then. Her smartphone chimed, and as expected, a message from Madison popped up. "Mom, I got full marks on my math test. I've also memorized the song for the next concert perfectly, so you must come to hear it." Lindsay couldn't help but smile. Her daughter had inherited her intelligence and her father's kindness, not to mention a talent for music. As she typed her reply, she thought of her husband in Hong Kong. Thomas's assignment at a major global IT firm was set to continue for another 8 months. His absence was lonely, but nightly video calls kept the family bond strong. "Congratulations, Madison. Let's order your favorite Thai food tonight as a special treat. I'll definitely be at the concert. We'll show the video to Dad too." Balancing work and parenting was never easy. However, Lindsay managed it skillfully. She always made sure they had breakfast together, and she tried to get home early for dinner as much as possible. On weekends, they would watch movies or go jogging in the nearby Green Lake Park. With her husband away, the bond between mother and daughter had only grown deeper. "Mizu Wang, it's almost time for your meeting." Olivia's voice brought Lindsay back to reality. The dispute case with a major construction company would be a tough negotiation, but that was what made it rewarding. Before entering the meeting room, Lindsay noticed a message from her mother, Debbie. "Lindsay, about this month's rent." Lindsay sighed softly. Since her father's death, her mother's financial situation had rapidly deteriorated. Her father had seemed a successful businessman, but in reality he had been burdened with substantial debt. The insurance money had vanished into debt repayment, and Debbie started receiving threatening calls from creditors. Using her legal expertise, Lindsay had begun legally protecting and financially supporting her mother. This included paying for her luxury apartment rent and living expenses, a duty she believed was hers as a daughter. Her support extended similarly to her sister Kristen, who had become a single mother after their parents' divorce. Kristen had been struggling with part-time jobs, but covering her son's education costs was beyond her means. When Kristen pleaded for Joseph's future, Lindsay couldn't say no. But now, Lindsay needed to focus on the task at hand. She decided to reply to the message later. Opening the conference room door, Lindsay greeted everyone with her usual smile. "Good morning, everyone. Let's begin our discussion." After the morning meeting, Lindsay looked outside. The drizzle had cleared up, and unusually, the sky was blue. Madison would be in her favorite English class by then. As she opened the door, Olivia came in with new documents. Final checks for tomorrow's trial. Also, Madison's school contacted us again about the change in the date for next week's parent-teacher meeting. The sky was beginning to fill with rain clouds again. "Mizu Wang, your mother is on the phone." Olivia's voice brought Lindsay back to the present. It was unusual for Debbie to call without waiting a day after sending a message. Calls from her mother were always about money. "I'm sorry I couldn't reply earlier because of work. What's up?" "Lindsay, it's about the rent and also about Joseph's school trip expenses." Her mother's voice had no hint of hesitation. Lindsay suppressed a deep sigh. Last week it was a new hobby. The week before it was tutoring fees. The demands seemed endless. "Let me think about it. I'll check the budget." On the other end of the phone, Lindsay could feel her mother's breath pause. The old Lindsay would have agreed immediately. However, lately, she felt the need to reassess her financial support to her family. Particularly troubling were her mother Debbie and sister Kristen's lifestyles. Their social media were frequently filled with pictures of luxury brands and fine dining. They depict lifestyles that surely couldn't be supported by part-time incomes alone. Thinking of her daughter Madison's future, Lindsay knew she couldn't continue the support indefinitely. Her husband Thomas had also expressed similar concerns during their recent video calls. Helping those you love is important, but creating dependency is not good, he had said. After hanging up with her mother, Lindsay opened her laptop. She began drafting a message in reply to the email from her mother that she had set aside. Please let me reconsider the amount of money I send from next month. I want to discuss this properly, so please tell me a convenient day for you. Before hitting send, Lindsay hesitated for a moment. She wondered what impact this decision would have on her family relationships. But it was a necessary decision. After sending the email, a call from her sister, Kristen, came through immediately. Why now? Anger was evident in her sister's voice. Think about Joseph's future. Let's talk about this calmly, Kristen. Calmly. Kristen's voice trembled. You spare no expense for Madison's needs. Lindsay was taken aback by those words. Indeed, she wanted the best education for Madison. But wasn't that a natural desire for any parent? The conversation ended without resolution. A week passed, and the parent-teacher meeting for Madison was approaching. There was a knock at the office door, and Olivia entered. Here are the final preparations for your business trip tomorrow. You have a morning flight. Thank you, Lindsay interrupted. Call my mother. Check if she can take Madison tomorrow. Normally, Lindsay would avoid leaving her daughter with her mother. But the next day's trial was critical, and she had no other choice. Plus, she was concerned about her mother. Since telling her about the reduction in support, she hadn't heard anything from her. While Kristen had called angrily, her mother's silence was unnerving. Olivia returned. Your mother said of course Joseph will be there too, so they can play together. Lindsay felt uneasy about the quick affirmation. Usually her mother would have more excuses for such requests. She might claim she was feeling ill or had plans with friends. But there was an important trial the following day. The trip was unavoidable. If Madison was to be left with anyone, her grandmother's house was the best option. Yet deep down, a sense of unease grew. During dinner with Madison, Lindsay asked her daughter, "Is it okay for you to stay at Grandma's tomorrow? You can play with Joseph." "Yeah." Madison hesitated, then added, "But lately, Joseph has been avoiding me." Lindsay listened closely to her daughter's words. Joseph's change in behavior, Kristen's irritation, her mother's unnaturally quick agreement to take Madison. All these hinted at something ominous. Yet, unable to define her foreboding, time passed. The next day, in the car to the airport, Lindsay recalled her parting words to her daughter. "Promise me, Madison. If anything happens, call me right away." "I know, Mom. It'll be fine." Madison responded with her usual bright smile. Lindsay left her daughter in her mother's care, watching her wave goodbye in the rearview mirror. Somehow, the sight lingered in her mind. Seattle-Tacoma International Airport was busy with the morning rush. After boarding, Lindsay reviewed her documents for the trial. The dispute with the major construction company was a pivotal case for her law firm. She tried to focus, but couldn't settle down. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will be taking off shortly." The flight attendant's announcement echoed in the cabin. Before turning off her cell phone, Lindsay checked for messages one last time. There was nothing from Madison. From Debbie as well. It should have been a normal occurrence, yet Lindsay couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The court session was proceeding smoothly. Lindsay's arguments were precise, and she was overwhelming the opposing counsel. Soon after the session was adjourned, her cell phone suddenly vibrated. It was from Madison. "Mom." With just that one word, Lindsay instinctively knew something terribly wrong had happened. "What's wrong, Madison?" "Grandma and the others. They left without me. Madison's voice was trembling. Lindsay felt the blood drain from her face. "What do you mean? Explain it to me in detail." "I was playing in the yard, and then everyone got in the car and left. Joseph, Grandma, and Aunt Kristen haven't come back." Lindsay's hands trembled. "Where are you now?" "At Grandma's house." "What should I do?" "Stay right there. I'm going to call the police immediately." Right after hanging up, Lindsay called her mother, Debbie. The phone rang several times. When it finally connected, her mother's voice was unnervingly calm. "I'm about to board a plane." With that, she hung up abruptly. Anger boiled inside Lindsay. She immediately reported it to the police. She explained that her 12-year-old daughter had been intentionally abandoned by her grandmother and aunt. She also contacted her office staff to prepare for any necessary legal proceedings. "Olivia, prepare the paperwork for a restraining order and hurry up the procedures to stop all transfers to my mother and Christine's bank accounts." "Yes, I'll get on it right away." While booking the next flight back to Seattle, Lindsay called Madison again. "Madison, a police car is on its way there. I'll be back as soon as I can." "Okay." Madison's voice sounded like she was about to cry. "Mom, I'm scared." "It's okay, you haven't done anything wrong. I'll be there soon." After hanging up, Lindsay struggled to control her emotions. Why would her mother and sister do such a thing? Abandoning a 12-year-old child like that was clear child neglect. Throughout her journey to the airport, Lindsay kept in touch with the police. She was informed that a patrol car had arrived at the scene and Madison was safely secured. The security camera at her mother's house showed Debbie and Kristen laughing as they got into the car. This was no accident. It was a deliberate act. On the plane back to Seattle, Lindsay's hands trembled as she took notes in her notebook. Timelines, evidence, necessary legal steps. She couldn't let her emotions get the better of her. She had to handle this calmly, as a lawyer should. When she arrived at her mother's house, Madison was with a police officer. The moment Lindsay saw her daughter, she nearly let all her emotions overflow. "Mom." Madison ran towards her, crying. Lindsay hugged her daughter tightly. She could feel her small body shaking. "You did really well. It's all okay now." A police officer approached them. "We've reviewed the footage from the security camera. It clearly shows a premeditated act. Would you like to file a complaint?" Lindsay paused for a moment, then resolved herself. "Yes, and I will also apply for a restraining order." At that moment, Lindsay's cell phone rang. It was from her mother. She rejected the call. Protecting her daughter was her top priority now. On the way home, Madison began to slowly recount what had happened. "Joseph suddenly became cold to me. And then when I was playing alone in the garden, I heard the sound of the lock and everyone was gone." Lindsay listened to her daughter while piecing together the events. The change in behavior of her mother and Kristen since she had informed them of the support review, Joseph's behavior, and the events of today. Everything was connected. Debbie had used Madison to intimidate Lindsay and coerce her into continuing her support. And Kristen saw it as an opportunity to vent her jealousy towards her successful sister. Upon arriving home, Lindsay immediately contacted her office. "Olivia, cancel all appointments starting tomorrow and arrange for a psychologist appointment for Madison." That day marked a significant change in their family's relationships. But it was an unavoidable choice. Lindsay had to protect her daughter and put an end to the distorted family dynamics. A heavy atmosphere hung in Lindsay's office conference room. Documents were neatly arranged on the table. Screenshots from the security camera, the initial police report, the application for a restraining order. Everything testified to the gravity of the previous day's events. "Mizu Wang, your mother has called Olivia," quietly informed her. "It's the 10th call this morning. Log the calls." But no need to respond. The video call with her husband Thomas in Hong Kong had been completed early in the morning. He had offered to return immediately, but Lindsay declined. She wanted to avoid emotional decisions. Everything needed to be handled legally and definitively. The office's consulting attorney, Wayne Harrison, entered. A longtime friend, he had come immediately upon hearing about the situation. "I've reviewed all the documents. The restraining order will undoubtedly be issued. The issue is what comes next." Lindsay nodded silently. "I've already started the process to completely stop the financial support." "That's a wise decision," Wayne continued while reviewing the documents. "But we need to consider their reaction, especially the possibility of defamation in public." At that moment, Lindsay's smartphone vibrated. It was a message from her mother via an SNS account she hadn't checked in a long time. "Why did you call the police?" "It's a family matter. Madison wasn't in any danger, it was just a lesson." Lindsay's hands shook. A lesson? Leaving a 12-year-old child behind as a lesson? There was a twisted intent to make Lindsay and Madison realize their vulnerability. "Don't get emotional," Wayne quietly advised. "They will certainly try to use your reaction against you." He was right. Lindsay took a deep breath and calmed herself. Her over 20 years of experience as a lawyer was being tested. "Did you manage to get an appointment for Madison's psychological counseling?" Lindsay asked Olivia. "Yes, tomorrow at 3 p.m. with Dr. Allison Gale." Her daughter's psychological care was the highest priority. Last night, Madison had been tormented by nightmares. Waking up, she'd anxiously asked, "Mom, are you still here?" Hearing that, Lindsay's heart felt like it was being torn apart. Lindsay, Wayne spoke in a low voice. "Do you know your mother and Christine's financial situation?" "Yes. My mother's rent, Joseph's school fees, and other living expenses. Stopping all that will make their lives unsustainable." "I know, but that's the consequence of their choices." Then a call came from the office reception. Kristen was there. "Turn her away," Lindsay instructed immediately. However, Kristen's voice could be heard in the hallway. "Lindsay, listen to me. It was for Madison's sake." Lindsay closed her eyes. Kristen thought by hurting Madison, she could control Lindsay. Her sister's cries brought back memories of their childhood. The smiles, the days they played together. Now, those memories were like deep cracks in ice. "Should I call security?" Olivia asked, concerned. "Please do." A few minutes later, Kristen's voice faded away, but its echo lingered heavily in the conference room. "It's not over yet," Lindsay said quietly. "They will surely try something." Wayne nodded silently. "That's why it's crucial to document everything and preserve evidence." That was exactly right. To not be swayed by emotions and to record everything. That was the top priority. In the afternoon, Lindsay left the office early. It was time to pick up Madison from school. Upon arrival, she saw her daughter chatting happily with friends. However, as soon as Madison saw her mother, she ran over. "Mom, you came to pick me up just like you promised." Hearing this, Lindsay's heart ached. The fear of being abandoned still lingered deep within her daughter. "Of course. I will never leave you behind." On the way home, Madison talked about her day at school. It was a normal conversation. Yet Lindsay felt the depth of her wounds through her occasionally anxious expressions. When they got home, there was a message from Debbie on the answering machine. "Lindsay, please, let's talk. It's terrible for the family to fall apart over something like this." Lindsay deleted the message before it even finished. There was no going back. This was not merely a family dispute, but a clear act of harm. At night, after Madison had gone to sleep, Lindsay was in the study preparing for the next day. The restraining order hearing, counseling appointments, and final checks on stopping financial support. Everything had to proceed without delay. It was the only way to protect her daughter and herself. A month had passed, and Lindsay was looking at the changing autumn scenery from the office window. On her desk monitor, there were notifications of Debbie's unpaid rent and Joseph's expulsion from school. After the restraining order was issued and all financial support was stopped, the anticipated consequences had begun to manifest one after another. Olivia brought in new documents. They were communications from Debbie and Kristen's representative. Initially, they had threatened to sue Lindsay for defamation. However, the clear evidence from the security camera footage made those threats empty. Schedule a meeting with their representative, Lindsay instructed calmly. She was determined to avoid emotional responses and handle everything through legal procedures. That was the best way to protect herself and her daughter. The previous night, Madison had a peaceful night for the first time in a while. The bi-weekly counseling was starting to show effects. According to Dr. Gale, Madison's recovery was progressing well. Still, the occasional anxious expressions tightened Lindsay's heart. "Your mother has moved out." Olivia's voice brought Lindsay back to reality. She left the upscale apartment in Bellevue last week. She was 3 months behind on rent. Lindsay nodded quietly. Her mother's new address was a state housing unit in the outskirts of downtown. It was a place unimaginable from her once elegant lifestyle. "There's also news about Kristen," Olivia continued. "Joseph's father, having heard about their plight during a visit, has gained custody. Kristen has been ordered to pay child support. She's living with your mother now." Just then, Wayne entered with new information. "There's something you should know," he began carefully. "Yesterday, Kristen was caught shoplifting at a local supermarket. It seems to have been settled by a plea agreement." Lindsay closed her eyes. Her sister's downfall was starkly apparent. "And there's more," Wayne continued. "Debbie was seen lining up at a church charity. She was there to receive food assistance. Such assistance would have been unthinkable for her mother in the past. The days when she enjoyed shopping at luxury boutiques felt like a distant past. All her posts on social media have been deleted as well," Olivia continued the report. "Photos of luxury brands and memories of overseas trips that had been posted before are all gone. The life of pretense had completely collapsed. The days painted over with vanity and dependence had crumbled entirely." From a legal standpoint, Wayne, as an expert, added his perspective. "Their current situation underscores the justification for discontinuing the support. It proves that their former luxurious lifestyle was entirely dependent on your financial aid." Lindsay nodded silently, processing the situation with restrained emotion. This was the result of a decision she had made, a necessary consequence. "Mom, look." In the afternoon, when Madison returned from school, she excitedly showed Lindsay her artwork. "My teacher said we should enter it in the art exhibition." Seeing her daughter's smile, Lindsay felt a sense of relief. Madison had been incredibly strong. Although her school performance had temporarily dropped after the incident, it was now returning to its previous level. "Congratulations, it's a wonderful piece." During a video call with Thomas, he too was pleased to hear about Madison's recovery. He had managed to shorten his assignment abroad and was scheduled to return next month. At the Seattle-Tacoma International Airport arrival lobby, Lindsay and Madison waited for Thomas to return from Hong Kong. "Dad's here," Madison exclaimed joyfully. "Welcome back," Lindsay said as she hugged her husband. "It's good to be all together again." As they got into the car, Thomas turned to speak to Madison in the back seat. "How's school, Madison?" "Yeah, it's fun. Next week is the Winter Music Festival. I've got a solo part on the piano." Madison's voice lacked the anxiety it once held. She was showing a maturity beyond her 12 years. Normal family times, normal happiness. Yet, Lindsay deeply felt that such normalcy was anything but taken for granted. The next morning, Lindsay went to the office early. There was a letter from her mother on her desk, marked as already opened. It had been delivered through legal procedures. "Lindsay, I won't ask for forgiveness anymore. I just hope you and Madison are happy." After reading the letter, Lindsay sighed deeply. Forgiving and mending the relationship were two separate matters. Now, she wanted to focus on building a new family structure. No more fears, no more worries. When she got home, Thomas had already returned and started preparing dinner. The delicious smell wafted from the kitchen. Madison had started practicing the piano in the living room. Her parents listened attentively to her playing. The music filled the room. My name is Christina, and I am 34 years old. I have been living quietly and peacefully with my 30-year-old husband, Michael. We met through a friend when I was 24 years old, and after 3 years of dating, we got married. We have been married for 7 years now. We don't have children, but we have been leading a reasonably happy life. However, one day, I received a phone call from my 27-year-old sister, Hannah. "Christina, please, can I stay at your house for a while?" she asked in a tearful voice. As I listened to her story, I learned that she had broken up with her fiancé and had also caused trouble at work, which led to her quitting her job. She had nowhere else to go. "All right, you can stay with us for a while," I said. As a family, I couldn't just leave her be. My husband Michael also readily agreed, saying, "Of course, it's okay." But at that time, I already felt a slight discomfort deep inside. The day my sister Hannah moved into our house, she displayed an uncharacteristic cheerfulness for someone who had just lost a lover. "I knew it. Your house is lovely. It's like a hotel," she exclaimed, sitting boldly on the living room sofa and elegantly sipping tea. I smiled wryly to myself and thought, well, it's just for a little while. However, her behavior gradually changed. First, it was her demeanor. Initially, she acted apologetic, but within a few days she began to behave as if it was her own home. She would wake up later than me, and while I was making coffee in the kitchen, she would start ordering me around, saying, "Christina, get the milk." That wasn't all. She also became unusually close to my husband, Michael. "Michael, you're trying to become an actor, right? That's wonderful." "I think men with dreams are really attractive," she said, her eyes sparkling. To which my husband Michael smiled as if not entirely displeased. "Thank you, Hannah. But I'm still getting rejected at auditions," he replied. "That's not true. You'll definitely succeed soon. Talented people will eventually flourish." My sister Hannah exaggeratedly praised and encouraged him. I felt uneasy watching this scene. Of course, there's nothing wrong with my sister encouraging my husband Michael, but there was a strange familiarity in her attitude. Moreover, my sister Hannah began to frequently bring up the topic of house ownership. "This house is really spacious and lovely, isn't it? Michael, did you find it?" "No, Christina decided on it. She handled all the contract procedures too," my husband Michael responded. "Oh." My sister Hannah fell silent, as if pondering something, then changed the topic. However, a strange unease began to grow inside me. From then on, she sought more opportunities to be alone with my husband Michael. I had to leave the house for work during the day. During that time, she would watch movies or go to cafes with my husband Michael. Today, I went to a new cafe with Michael. It was very stylish, and the coffee was delicious. My sister Hannah excitedly told me when I got home. I maintained my composure, but I felt a slight thorn in my heart. A few weeks later, I noticed a subtle change in my husband Michael's attitude. "Christina, have you been cold to me lately?" he asked one night. "What?" "No, not at all," I replied. "Somehow I feel like Hannah sees me better than you do," he said. I was shocked and angry at the same time. "Michael, have you forgotten that I'm the one supporting you?" My husband Michael was at a loss for words. He lived like a stay-at-home husband while trying to become an actor, and I continued to work to support his dream. Yet, what was he talking about? That night, I sat alone in the living room, deep in thought. Since my sister Hannah had come, my relationship with my husband Michael seemed to have slowly changed. Was I truly supporting him? Or was I just being conveniently used? I had no concrete evidence yet. I couldn't imagine then that this discomfort would eventually lead to a definitive betrayal. One day, I came home and immediately sensed an unusual atmosphere. The house was too quiet. Normally, I would hear the TV or my husband Michael and my sister Hannah's laughter, but today there was nothing. As I entered the living room, my husband Michael and my sister Hannah were sitting on the sofa, smiling as if they had been waiting for me. "Welcome home, Christina. We were waiting to have dinner together." "I'm home." The house was strangely quiet, so I thought you both weren't here. "Thanks for making dinner." "I'm starving." After dinner, while I was cleaning up, my husband suddenly said, "I want a divorce." "What? What did you just say?" My hand, holding a wine glass on the dining table, involuntarily stiffened. My husband Michael's face showed no sign of guilt. Instead, there was almost a relaxed smile. "I've fallen out of love with you. I can't be with you anymore, Christina." His words were chillingly cold. I was shocked by the way he treated the time we had built together as a couple, as if it were nothing significant. "Michael, is that really all? Have you really lost interest in me so easily?" My husband Michael did not answer, but instead looked over my shoulder at Hannah. At that moment, a bad feeling surged through me. My sister Hannah slowly stepped forward, a meaningful smile on her face, and said, "Christina, I'm pregnant." "What? You are pregnant?" "Yes, with Michael's child." There was a triumphant look in Hannah's eyes. I heard something crumble inside my mind. This house belongs to Michael. So Christina, you should leave right away. Upon hearing Hannah's words, I took a deep breath. Anger surged within me, but more importantly, I had to think clearly. They clearly expected me to be upset and lose my composure. But I wouldn't let things go their way. "I see." I slowly placed my wine glass on the table and faced them. "This house is in my name. So, shouldn't you two be the ones to leave?" My sister Hannah's face changed color instantly. Her previous confident smile vanished and her mouth twitched. "Christina, what are you talking about? It's simple. This house is mine. Michael could live here because I allowed it. But if you're going to say such things, there's no need for that anymore." My sister Hannah glanced at my husband Michael for a moment, but he also looked perplexed. Apparently, both of them thought I would agree to the divorce without any fuss. "You don't own anything anymore." My sister Hannah persisted. "It's obvious you'll struggle financially without Michael. You have no options. If you think so, that's naive." I quietly smiled. "I have my own job, and I'm not as destitute as you think. Rather, it seems like you two might end up having more problems." My sister Hannah's face turned pale. My husband Michael, sensing my calm demeanor, frowned, now visibly worried. "Christina, what are you trying to say?" My husband Michael said in a low voice. "It's simple. I'm just saying that I'm not as powerless as you think." I stood up and slowly left the room. As soon as I entered another room, I called my mother. "Mom, there's something I need to tell you." I started speaking, my voice trembling over the phone. My mother's response was drawn out, but I quickly continued. "Mom, Hannah and Michael were having an affair, and Hannah is pregnant." I struggled with my words, but it was a major issue I had to convey. After a moment of silence, my mother finally spoke. "That's really terrible. What are you going to do now?" I thought I detected surprise and concern in my mother's voice, but there was a calmness there too. "I don't know what to do, but I can't understand how this happened." I desperately held back tears welling up inside me. "What should we do as a family?" After a moment of silence, my mother's reply was cold. "Why don't you just get a divorce? That seems the quickest solution." Her words were completely different from the help I was seeking. Her voice seemed emotionally detached, and I felt her words pierce me. "Divorce?" I was startled, and my voice shook. "Mom, why would you say something so cold?" "But if Hannah is pregnant, isn't divorce the only option?" My mother stated matter-of-factly, seemingly indifferent to my reaction. It was as if she prioritized a practical solution over my feelings and our family bonds. In that moment, I felt completely betrayed by the expectation that my mother would support me, and a huge void formed in my heart. The coldness was as unbearable as my husband's betrayal for me, who had believed in the bonds of our family. The next day, I accidentally learned a secret about my husband Michael. Late at night, I saw him on the phone in his study and stopped, curious. The door was slightly open, and a low voice leaked out. As I casually listened, I heard unexpected words. "I told Christina about the divorce like you said, Mother. But it doesn't seem like she'll accept it easily. What should I do?" "Mother?" he said. I felt my whole body freeze. My husband Michael was talking to my mother. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, but I decided to listen more intently. But my husband Michael was saying something in response, and then I was shocked by the next words he said. "I was able to stay at home full-time because of your support. I tried to repay that kindness." At that moment, I was taken aback. He must have believed all this time that he was receiving support from my parents. However, in reality, it was undoubtedly my earnings that supported our household. I remembered how desperately I had worked. It was me who supported my husband Michael's dreams and his lifestyle. On another day, I heard a shocking story from a friend. My husband Michael and I share many mutual friends, and one of them told me that Michael had been saying, "Christina's family is wealthy, so even if I remarry Hannah, I can maintain the same affluent lifestyle." I was stunned by this revelation. A chain of betrayals and misunderstandings. I stood frozen, feeling everything crumbling around me. The divorce was my mother's strategy, and my husband Michael, misunderstanding that he had support from my parents, followed her lead and brought up divorce. My mind was made up. There was no need to endure this life any longer. I took a deep breath, calming my heart. Then, I told myself, let go of everything and be free. There was no hesitation in my heart. There was no longer any reason to continue my marriage with my husband Michael. That weekend, I called Michael and my sister Hannah to the living room. They exchanged awkward glances but also seemed somewhat defiant. "I'm thinking of divorcing Michael, but I will be asking for compensation, so be prepared," I said calmly. My sister Hannah immediately reacted. "That's terrible." Just what I snapped coldly. "What do you mean just after having an affair with my husband?" My sister Hannah shut her mouth. Michael sighed irritably and said, "There's no need to pay compensation. Hannah and I love each other." I scoffed. "Love each other? Haha, do as you please, but you'll pay the price. Also, this house is mine. Leave immediately." Michael's face contorted. "Don't joke. Where are we supposed to go?" "I don't care. You two are in love, right? Then you can manage anywhere." My sister Hannah anxiously grabbed Michael's arm. "Michael." Michael glared at me, but he seemed to understand that he had no legal ground. After a moment of silence, he stood up with a click of his tongue. "That's fine. We'll leave." My sister Hannah, still wanting to resist, said tearfully, "Christina, please? Please." I looked down at her coldly. "After destroying my family, what are you asking for now?" My sister Hannah had nothing to say and looked down. Eventually, the two reluctantly packed their bags and left the house. They had nowhere to go and ended up temporarily staying at a friend's house of Michael. But I didn't care anymore. I had finally driven them out of my life. As I proceeded with the divorce, my mother called me. She sounded somewhat cheerful and detached as usual. "Christina, I heard you're getting a divorce." "That's good," she said too casually. I was stunned by her flippant tone. She seemed to accept it as the natural course of events, showing no concern for my feelings. A mix of anger and sadness welled up in me, but I continued the conversation calmly. "Since my sister Hannah and ex-husband had an affair, I intend to claim compensation," I said. My mother sounded a bit surprised and then chuckled lightly. Michael is an actor, right? He has a decent income, so claiming compensation will easily solve things. You don't need to take money unnecessarily. If Hannah and the baby can live happily, that's enough. At that moment, I realized my mother did not understand Michael's actual financial situation at all. Being an actor didn't necessarily mean having wealth. Besides, the issue was not about money but about the responsibility for the betrayal by my husband and sister. My mother's attitude of, if there's money, there's no problem, left me speechless. Mom, are you serious? Her words seemed to imply that my feelings didn't matter. Prioritizing my sister's future stability and looking forward to the birth of her grandchild was my mother's true sentiment. I can't simply accept this. This isn't just a divorce. I've been betrayed, I said. But my mother's attitude didn't change. I sighed deeply and moved the phone away from my ear. My mother was still saying something, but I couldn't bring myself to listen any longer. I was no longer in doubt. With the anger of being betrayed by my husband and the sadness of having no allies in my family, I resolved to exact thorough revenge. A few weeks later, I received an unexpected call from my friend Jocelyn. She wanted to meet and talk, so we arranged to meet at a cafe. As I sipped my coffee, I intently waited for Jocelyn to speak. She was the wife of a friend of Michael's, where he and my sister Hannah were currently staying, and she had known me for some time. Placing her coffee cup down gently, Jocelyn began to speak with a serious look. "Christina, I'm going to tell you the truth about Michael and Hannah." Seeing me slightly furrow my brow, Jocelyn chose her words carefully. "I hesitated about whether to tell you, but I think it's better if you know." After taking a deep breath, she quietly began. "At first, I had no suspicions. Michael and Hannah started staying at our place, and everything seemed normal for a while. But little by little, I began to feel something was off." "Off?" I looked into Jocelyn's eyes. "It's Hannah's behavior. She was drinking wine calmly and repeatedly. At first I thought it might just be a one-off, but a pregnant woman wouldn't do that, right? Also, there were no signs she was going for any prenatal checkups." I clenched my fist. "And then," Jocelyn continued with a worried look, "one evening my husband and I discussed it and decided to ask Michael directly, is Hannah really pregnant then? Michael, he looked really flustered for a moment. But after that, as he thought back on Hannah's actions, he started to notice several inconsistencies." Jocelyn gripped her coffee cup tightly and continued quietly. "So, during dinner one evening, Michael directly asked Hannah, 'I'll come with you to your next checkup then.'" She started dodging his eyes, trying to evade the question. "Evade?" "Yes. When was it?" "I need to check my schedule," she kept saying, not really answering. "And when Michael pressed, 'You are really pregnant, right?' Hannah suddenly got angry. 'Didn't I tell you I am?' As if she was trying to deceive him. Jocelyn's voice trembled slightly. But by then, Michael had realized. So he forced her to go to the hospital. I remained silent, staring into my cup of coffee. Anger and sadness swirled in my head. And the result? Jocelyn shook her head slightly. "Ultimately, Hannah wasn't pregnant at all," she said with a sigh. I quietly waited for her to continue. "They've been arguing ever since they came back from the hospital. They were so heated that they didn't even notice I was there." Jocelyn frowned, as if recalling the atmosphere of that moment. "Enough already," Hannah shouted. I'd never seen her like that before. It was as if she was convincing herself all I wanted was to get married. "Michael, I just wanted to marry you." I listened in silence, feeling a slow burn of rage building inside me. Michael just stared at her in disbelief. "Why would you lie about being pregnant?" When he asked that, his voice was trembling. "And what did Hannah say?" Jocelyn lowered her eyes and continued quietly. "My sister and Michael couldn't have children, right?" she said, as if it was a matter of fact. When Michael pressed her, "So what?" she replied. "So, I thought if I said I was pregnant, Michael would easily leave my sister." I clenched my hand. "That's despicable." "Yes, it is." But at that moment, Hannah completely lost her composure. But in the end, everything backfired, didn't it? She muttered with a vacant look. Jocelyn shook her head bitterly. Hearing that, Michael completely lost it. It's your fault. I'm being sued for compensation, and I've lost my home because of you, he yelled, hitting the living room wall hard. Michael did. I'd never seen him like that before. He always acted so composed, but he couldn't hold back his emotions anymore. It's all because of your lies. You pay for it. Isn't your family wealthy anyway? He confronted her. I smirked ironically. Typical of Michael. In the end, it's all about money. I can't believe it. Jocelyn looked sad. Yes. But then Hannah suddenly went quiet. So, you wanted to marry me just for the money, she said with a cold look. Jocelyn traced her coffee cup with her finger as she continued. Michael twisted his face in irritation. Yes, I decided to marry you because your family was wealthy. I wanted a stable life. What's wrong with that? He retorted. That is disgusting, I said dismissively. Hannah just chuckled. So all those I love yous were lies? She asked. But Michael bluntly replied, that's just words. Look at the reality then. Hannah suddenly laughed, breathing out a small sigh, truly despicable. But let me tell you something. My family doesn't have any money. Jocelyn continued her story in a matter-of-fact tone. The color drained from Michael's face. Hannah coldly laughed. If you were after money, it was wrong from the start. I almost burst out laughing. In the end, they both got what they deserved, haha. Exactly. Their relationship is completely broken now. Hannah stayed with us, but we've reached our limit, and I finally told her, you need to leave. Jocelyn shrugged with a wry smile. So, they might be wandering the streets by now. I sipped my cold coffee and smiled quietly. Serves them right, haha. Jocelyn seemed a bit taken aback but soon sighed. Christina, what are you going to do? I slowly set down my cup and looked straight into Jocelyn's eyes. It's decided. My voice filled with anger and determination. Jocelyn, thank you for telling me. Jocelyn looked at me anxiously but said nothing. I was somewhat curious about how my sister Hannah was getting by after being thrown out of the house, but it was all her responsibility, and it no longer had anything to do with me. She must be seeking help from our parents. Sure enough, the next day, I received a call from them. Christina, we've heard from Hannah. We understand why you can't forgive your sister, but you two are siblings. Can't you reconcile somehow? My father pleaded, but I didn't answer right away. Then my mother took the phone. Christina, we're family. Let's forget the past and start over. Hannah is remorseful, she said, her voice desperate, but it resonated hollowly with me. Mom, when I was suffering, you didn't protect me. And now you say we're family, so just forget the past. Please, Christina. Please. It's too late, Mom. I rejected my parents' plea. Every time I recalled how hurt and alone I had been, their words felt empty. When I was betrayed, my parents never supported me even once. Now, to hear them say convenient things was more than I could accept. Forgiving not only my sister but also my parents' betrayal was not something I could easily do. I learned from relatives that my sister Hannah had eventually returned to our parents' house. According to them, my parents had reluctantly accepted her. They had even told their friends and relatives about the expected grandchild. Now that everyone knew the truth that it had all been a lie, my sister Hannah faced criticism from all sides. My mother complained that my sister Hannah had embarrassed them terribly, and at family gatherings, my parents felt uncomfortable. Meanwhile, I finalized my divorce and sold the house where I had lived for many years. Deciding to start a new life, I prioritized taking care of myself and moving beyond the past pains. By then, Michael, too, had lost everything. Jobless, chased by compensation payments, and nearly broke, Michael and my sister Hannah were both left in a desolate loneliness of their own making. Quietly smiling, I murmured, "That's the path you chose." Having cut ties with the past, I now looked forward to a future filled with hope and love. I am Irene, a 30-year-old enjoying my single life. I work in sales at a foreign-owned company. For me, family trips are an annual tradition that provides a special time to rejuvenate my mind and body while reaffirming my bond with my family. My family has decided to visit Hawaii every year, where we relax on the beautiful beaches and savor the fresh local cuisine. This trip has been one of my cherished memories since childhood. Of course, this year too, that season was approaching, and I was looking forward to going to Hawaii with my entire family. However, after the Christmas Eve family party ended and I was cleaning up, my mother abruptly said something that cruelly shattered my expectations. Irene, I don't think you'll be able to join us for the Hawaii trip this year. I was at a loss for words at the sudden statement. What do you mean? When I asked, my mother averted her gaze and began to explain. This year the budget is tight. It's also partly because you reduced your financial support to Christoph's family a bit. I listened to my mother's words in disbelief. Several years ago, I was informed that my brother Christoph's family was in a difficult financial situation, and thinking of my nephew and niece, I began providing monthly support. Even though I don't have an exceptional income, I've managed to contribute a significant amount to support my family. Even so, being told I couldn't join the trip didn't make sense to me. But I've been sending a considerable amount every month. I thought there was enough to plan a Hawaii trip with that money. My mother showed a troubled expression but said nothing in return. Instead, my father spoke up. Well, while we were adjusting the plans, certain circumstances arose, and we had no choice but to prioritize Christoph's family. What circumstances? I let out a deep sigh. The atmosphere was heavy, and I didn't feel like pressing further. However, anger and questions swirled within me. To begin with, the reason for my brother Christoph's family's financial difficulties was never entirely clear, and my doubts about it were never resolved. Because of that, I had always carried a sense of unease in my heart. That night I stayed alone in my room, deeply lost in thought. Up until now, I had continued to provide financial support for Christoph's family, believing it was for their sake. But why was the money always so insufficient? I had been supporting them while sacrificing my own pleasures and saving by living a frugal life. The money should have been managed by his wife, Colleen, and I didn't think they were spending it on unnecessary things. At that moment, a certain thought crossed my mind. There was one thing that had been bothering me, so I decided to confirm it directly with Christoph. Since I had believed Christoph's words without question and continued my financial support, he had a responsibility to explain the reasons properly. I decided to use my next vacation as an opportunity to meet Christoph and get some answers. The meeting place was a local cafe, a quiet spot where there were no children or family members around. Sitting across the table from me, Christoph looked slightly nervous. "It's been a while, Irene," Christoph said with a smile. "Yes, it has. I have something I want to ask you today." Without returning his smile, I got straight to the point. "Can you tell me how you've been using the money I've sent so far?" Christoph's eyes widened for a moment and he froze as if at a loss for words. "Well, of course, it's for the family, for living expenses, education, and so on. Is that all?" I calmly asked, my sharp gaze piercing Christoph. He flinched and closed his mouth. Sensing his silence, I pressed further. "Christoph, is it true that you've been having an affair?" At those words, the color drained from Christoph's face. His eyes darted nervously for a moment and he bit his lip with a pained expression before muttering in a low voice, "Who told you?" I raised an eyebrow slightly at his question, but quickly responded quietly, "Does it matter who told me? So you are having an affair, aren't you?" I was a bit shocked by the revelation of his infidelity, but I knew I needed to get to the bottom of the money issue, so I continued. "The affair is a problem, but what I want to know is where the money went. I need you to explain in detail how the money I sent for the kids was used. Why is there a shortage of funds? Christophe remained silent, but I could see the tension clearly running down his back. He seemed torn between confessing and finding a way to dodge the question, but it took a while before he finally spoke. Eventually, with a deep sigh, he began, as if bracing himself. Yes, I did have an affair, I admit it. But it's over now. There's nothing between us anymore. I'm truly sorry. His voice wavered slightly, making his apology sound less convincing. I stared into his eyes and asked my next question. And what about my money? At that, Christophe fell silent again. Finally he spoke, his face contorted. I gave her some. Just a little. I haven't calculated the exact amount. Originally, I intended it to supplement our living expenses, but in the end, part of it... So you used the money on your affair partner, I said, as if confirming the obvious. Christophe couldn't meet my eyes, staring down instead and muttering vaguely, "It's all over now, really. So, can't you forgive me?" I scoffed lightly, leaning back in my chair with my arms crossed. Forgive you? The money I sent was for your kids, and you used it without permission on your affair partner? Whether or not I accept your apology is one thing, but forgiving the situation? Not a chance. For a moment, it felt as if the cafe was enveloped in an eerie silence. Then I cut to the heart of the matter. You said you don't know the exact amount you spent on her. Was it around $10,000? More than that? Christophe's face grew even paler, and in a strained voice he replied, "Maybe around that. It's possible." It's possible? Don't you feel ashamed using such vague language? I showed no mercy, though little by little, without even realizing, the money just drained away, like a bucket with a hole in the bottom. Christophe looked up, unable to hold it in anymore. I know, but don't blame me like this. I regret it too. Do you think you don't deserve the blame? Have you even thought about how Colleen feels? Or your family? My voice was no longer just angry. It carried a detached, almost cold indifference. You've lost something far greater than money. Trust. Do you even understand how high that cost is? Christophe's face twisted bitterly as he sank into his chair, shoulders slumping. Colleen already knows. Divorce has come up. His words softened my expression for a brief moment, but I quickly steeled myself again. Then, this is where the conversation ends. I won't be sending you any more money. You'll have to figure things out on your own. Wait, Irene, please! Christophe reached out in a panic, his voice desperate as he pleaded. If you suddenly cut me off like this, I don't know what will happen to my family. There's still a chance to fix things. I raised my hand to stop him. There's no point in talking further. The money I sent, what it was used for, and the result, that's the situation we're in now. That's enough. From here on out, you need to take responsibility for yourself. Leaving those words heavy with meaning, I stood up. As I walked away, I made a firm decision in my heart. There was no way I could tolerate my hard-earned money being used for such irresponsible actions. About a week before my meeting with Christophe, his affair had been discovered by Colleen. One day, she happened to find an intimate message on Christophe's smartphone. Fueled by suspicion, Colleen confronted him, and one piece of evidence after another surfaced. With no way out, Christophe confessed to everything. The details and duration of the affair shattered Colleen's trust entirely, and her anger surpassed anything I could have imagined. No matter how many times Christophe apologized, Colleen's anger and despair ran deep, and the damage to their relationship couldn't be undone. Even so, Christophe desperately tried to repair the situation. He apologized repeatedly, begged for forgiveness, but not a shred of trust remained in Colleen's heart. As time passed, Colleen's resolve hardened, and she ultimately decided to divorce him. It was a few months ago when Colleen confided in me about Christophe's affair. With a somber expression, she began, "Lately, Christophe's been acting strangely cold and suspicious." As I listened, she revealed her concerns about his habit of hiding his phone, and the sudden increase in his late returns home. Although surprised, I listened carefully, supporting her as she expressed her anxiety and anger. Since no concrete evidence had been found yet, I had hoped Colleen was simply overthinking things. However, with Christophe's affair proven to be true, I could not forgive him. The fact that my money had been given to his affair partner was also deeply upsetting. From that day on, I began to slowly regain my composure and made an effort to sort out my feelings. The love I felt for Colleen, my nephew, and my niece clashed with the disappointment I had in Christophe, leading to countless sleepless nights. Each time, I felt an overwhelming heaviness in my heart and could do nothing but turn my thoughts over and over in my mind. As I gradually confronted that pain, I decided to focus on my work. It seemed like the only way to shift my mindset. I wanted even just a little to ease the burden on my heart. From then on, I threw myself into my work, feeling a growing sense of clarity as I immersed myself in my duties. Forcing myself to stay motivated through my tasks, I eventually began to think more calmly and rationally about everything. A few weeks later, I made a firm decision. I would stop supporting Christophe financially. I felt a deep sense of guilt toward Colleen, my nephew, and my niece, but I knew I had no other choice. I spent several days with lingering doubts about whether my decision had been the right one. One day, an important meeting at my workplace added another layer of stress. The meeting's agenda was about financial issues with a partner company. Since external dealings were involved, the matter was complex and required a very delicate approach. Feeling a strong sense of responsibility for my role, I poured all my energy into preparing for it. During the meeting, when I heard Christophe's company's name come up, I felt a momentary pang of tension, but I maintained a calm exterior and stated my opinion. For companies that are dependent on the funding we provide, we need to conduct even more thorough risk evaluations. In particular, cases where financial transparency is lacking should be closely scrutinized. My statement had not explicitly named Christophe's company. However, there were undoubtedly those who understood the implications of my words. My company was Christophe's company's largest client, and the relationship between the two was critical to the operations of both businesses. If my company were to halt its funding, Christophe's company would face significant consequences, making it difficult to recover. Unless the issue was fully resolved, the future of Christophe's company would inevitably remain bleak. Even Christophe himself seemed aware of his company's precarious situation. Through office rumors and frequent meetings held by his superiors, he could sense that things were not going well. The company's operations were not running smoothly, and its financial problems were becoming increasingly severe by the day. Rumors began to circulate that their relationships with key clients, which had been a lifeline, were starting to crack. It became clear that these rumors were likely true, and Christophe couldn't ignore their growing reality. Troubled by issues at home, Christophe found himself further cornered by the worsening state of his company, with no idea how to turn things around. That day, upon returning from a sales trip, Christophe was greeted by his visibly flustered subordinates. Their faces betrayed a clear sense of unease and urgency about the grim situation they knew lay ahead. It was hardly surprising, as there was no trace of optimism within Christophe's company. Problems continued to surface like ripples spreading on water, one after another. "Mr. Christophe, we've got a serious problem. We've received a notice from one of our major clients stating that the renewal of our funding agreement is currently on hold. They haven't provided details, but it's been suggested that there may be concerns about our reliability." Christophe was stunned. Even losing a single client would have serious repercussions for their operations. Among them, my company was an especially critical partner. Find out the details immediately. Contact the person in charge and get a full grasp of the situation. Meanwhile, I understood the weight of the responsibility I bore for proposing a suspension of dealings. It was clear that Christophe's company was on the verge of collapse, but I carefully maintained a boundary between emotions and business. A few days later, I reached out to Christophe again. It wasn't just a personal issue between siblings. I felt a formal discussion from a business perspective was necessary. Christophe, I want to meet and talk again. Let me know the time and place that works for you. Christophe sighed as he read my message, torn as he typed his reply. Got it. How about the same cafe this weekend? On the day of our meeting, we faced each other again in the cafe, the tension between us even heavier than before. The fatigue on Christophe's face was evident, and I could tell at a glance that he was cornered. I came today to talk about work as well, I said bluntly, diving straight in. I've heard that your company is struggling with cash flow. Christophe frowned, lowering his voice as he responded. That's true. But what's the point of bringing it up now? You're not planning to help, are you? I'm not here to help, I replied firmly. I wanted you to understand the standards our company uses to determine whether to continue a business relationship, and I think you need to take a much more serious look at why you're failing to meet those standards. At my words, Christophe fell silent. You can't keep relying on money and connections to fix things anymore. As your family, that's all I can say. I spoke plainly, then left the cafe. What direction Christophe's life would take from this moment was still uncertain. The outcomes awaiting him were unclear, and the consequences of his choices would now be determined by his own decisions and responsibilities. This moment became a pivotal reminder for me of the weight of personal accountability. While the fate of Christophe's company was significant, my thoughts were mostly consumed by the family he had shattered as a result of his affair. I couldn't stop thinking about the future of my nephew and niece, who had been affected by the fallout of the affair and impending divorce. I couldn't simply ignore Christophe's behavior, knowing there must be a way to prevent their future from being destabilized by an irresponsible person. I realized that if no action was taken, more victims would continue to emerge. A few days later, a change came into my own life. My efforts and achievements were recognized, and I was promoted to department manager. As a manager, I now carried greater responsibilities than ever before and found myself in situations where I had to make even more critical decisions in my daily work. However, I was determined to face these responsibilities head-on without running away. One day, while reviewing an important document at work, something caught my eye. The contents highlighted how crucial my decision-making would be for future operations. It was related to a contract with the small business where Christophe worked. The document detailed the mutually beneficial relationship we had built over the past several years. But upon closer examination, I began to question whether this business relationship was truly justifiable. The next morning, I convened an urgent meeting with the legal and accounting departments to request a thorough audit of our dealings with Christophe's company. We must make decisions purely based on business logic, without any influence from personal ties, I firmly stated. My colleagues agreed with my stance and immediately set the necessary actions in motion. The results of the investigation confirmed my suspicions. Christophe's company was struggling financially, and it was revealed that some payments were overdue. This cannot be overlooked, the head of the legal department said emphatically. Considering their circumstances, this situation could negatively impact our company if left unaddressed. We should proceed with renegotiating the contract immediately. I nodded firmly. Let's proceed with steps towards suspending our transactions. However, please ensure the other party is given a reasonable grace period. As a result, Christophe's company lost its critical support from my company, their primary client. Christophe received this news the following day. Christophe panicked and immediately called me. Irene, why would you do this? Suspending the contract like this. This is business. It wasn't a decision made based on personal feelings. If your company had been managed properly, this wouldn't have happened. I can't believe how cold you've become. We're family. Being family doesn't mean I'll overlook dishonesty or irresponsible behavior. I made the right decision as a department manager. A manager. I hadn't mentioned it, had I? I was promoted to department manager recently. I didn't know. I had no idea you were in such a position. Christophe fell silent, at a loss for words. My unwavering resolve and the harsh reality left him with no escape. Our company's decision to suspend the contract with Christophe's company was a painful but necessary choice to protect the interests of both sides. However, the decision caused greater repercussions than anticipated, quickly spreading to other business partners. In the industry, trust is paramount, and once lost, it is incredibly difficult to regain. Rumors spread rapidly, and Christophe's company found itself losing orders from clients one after another. As a result, cash flow worsened, and delays in paying employee salaries began to affect the entire operation. Moreover, securing new clients became nearly impossible, and the company's reputation hit rock bottom. The decision we made was the catalyst that pushed Christophe's company toward a financial crisis. Additionally, the public exposure of his affair led to unavoidable legal proceedings regarding the divorce. With custody and living arrangements for my nephew and niece becoming increasingly complicated, Christophe seemed to finally grasp the gravity of the consequences his reckless actions had caused. Meanwhile, I began exploring alternative ways to support my nephew and niece so they wouldn't have to bear further uncertainty. I decided to set up a trust account specifically for their educational expenses, taking direct control of its management. This ensured that the funds couldn't be misused by Christophe, and that the money would be properly allocated for its intended purpose. Furthermore, I decided to enroll Christophe's children in an educational support program offered through my company. This would provide them with more opportunities and expand their future options as much as possible. In this way, I found a way to impose direct consequences on Christophe while still providing the minimum level of support as a family member. I am confident that this decision was the right one. However, Christophe's situation continued to deteriorate. Desperate to rebuild his company, Christophe worked tirelessly alongside his colleagues. Yet reality was unforgiving, and despite their efforts, his company was unable to recover from its financial struggles, eventually facing bankruptcy. After the company collapsed, Christophe encountered even greater challenges. No matter how hard he tried to repair his relationship with Colleen and regain his family's trust, her feelings remained unchanged. Eventually, their divorce was finalized. Christophe was heartbroken, overwhelmed with regret for losing the family that once meant so much to him. Then came another blow. He learned that full custody of his children had been awarded to Colleen. Losing his children filled Christophe with sorrow, regret, and a deep sense of loneliness. The peaceful days he had once shared with his family became distant memories, while the harshness of his current reality loomed mercilessly before him. News of Christophe's affair and divorce reached our parents as well, and they decided to disown him. They didn't ask why Christophe had chosen to engage in the affair. For them, losing custody of their grandchildren felt like losing the children themselves, leaving them deeply disappointed. The parents who had once supported him warmly now chose to step away from him entirely. Faced with this cold reality, Christophe was overwhelmed by feelings of powerlessness and regret. No matter how many apologies he offered, his family's trust could not be restored, and he found himself isolated in despair. As for me, I chose to move forward, refusing to be consumed by the family's problems. I took time to reflect on myself and decided to take a new step, leaving my family home to live on my own. Though leaving the familiar comfort of family life was bittersweet, I felt that establishing an independent life in a new environment was something I needed to do. When I first moved my belongings into my new apartment, I realized that this was my own space, a fresh start, and the first step toward carving out my own life. The new days ahead would come with challenges, but I believed they would also bring growth. On top of that, after several years, I found myself in a relationship again. My boyfriend is the calm and thoughtful type I've been longing for, someone who truly understands and supports me. The time we spend together is always fulfilling. At work, I continue to excel as a department manager, contributing to the company's success and generating results. Through my daily life, I've learned to value myself and rediscover the joys of life. In my heart, I feel a growing sense of hope, filled with new possibilities. Now, I look forward to the future I am building with my own hands. My name is Myra. I have an older sister, Lizzie, who is 3 years older than me. I also have a mother, a stepfather, and a biological father who lives apart from us. In a normal family, I would be able to explain things this easily, but that's not the case for me. The story of my family is far more complicated and sorrowful. Looking back, the cracks in my family may have started when Lizzie passed the entrance exam for a prestigious private elementary school. I was too young to remember, but I heard later from my father that at the time, my mother was overjoyed. With this, Lizzie's future is guaranteed. Behind those words, there may have already been a sense of favoritism toward my sister. My mother called Lizzie a super child. She started playing the piano at the age of 3, attended French conversation classes at 4, and passed the entrance exam for a competitive private school. My mother proudly showcased Lizzie's talents as if they were her own trophies. On the other hand, I was an ordinary child and a sickly child. I had chronic asthma. My academics were average, my physical activities were limited, and I had no skills that stood out. But I did love drawing. In kindergarten, a picture of my family that I drew was praised by my teacher and displayed in the classroom. However, my mother showed no interest in my drawings. Drawing is fine as long as it's just a hobby. I wonder if my mother ever realized how deeply those words wounded my young heart. I sometimes desperately tried to earn my mother's affection. I wanted to discover a special talent like Lizzie had. But that wish never came true. My mother's attention was always focused solely on Lizzie. The one who saved me from that loneliness was my biological father. On his days off, he always made time for both Lizzie and me. When he learned that I loved drawing, he started spending those days drawing with me. "Myra, your drawings are wonderful." My father always praised my clumsy drawings. One day, he told me that he had displayed one of my drawings on his desk at work. I still vividly remember how happy I felt when I heard that. My father never discriminated between Lizzie and me. When we went to the park, he would push the swing for each of us the same number of times. When buying ice cream, he always made sure to choose ones of equal value for both of us. Those small acts of consideration warmed my heart. "Myra, I want both you and Lizzie to dream big." He would often say that as he patted our heads. Even when he came home tired, he would listen to our stories, laugh with us, and seriously think about our worries. His presence gradually healed the loneliness I felt from my mother's indifference. I still remember my 6th birthday. That day, my mother was away for Lizzie's extracurricular activities. I was home alone in the evening. Being left alone like that was normal, and my mother didn't mind leaving young me at home. Usually I would just draw and wait, but that day was my birthday. I felt lonely, unable to eat cake or celebrate with anyone. But my busy father adjusted his schedule and came home early. He couldn't make a homemade cake, but I still remember the image of him carefully placing candles on the cake he bought from the supermarket. "Myra, just be yourself and find what you love." His words were the complete opposite of my mother's belief that I had to be special. My father taught me the beauty of being ordinary. However, when I was 7 years old, my daily life changed dramatically. The cause was my parents' divorce. I don't have many memories from that time, but the image of my father's back as he left the house and the muffled sound of my mother's sobbing are still engraved in my heart. When my father patted my head for the last time, the warmth of his large hand felt as if it would last forever. But that warmth became a fleeting memory. My father worked as a sales representative at a well-known company, but my mother felt that his salary wasn't enough. Especially after my sister Lizzie started attending a private elementary school, the cost of education and my mother's social expenses put a strain on our family's finances. My mother's social expenses were primarily spent on outings with other mothers from Lizzie's private school, known as Mom Friends. They held weekly lunch gatherings at upscale restaurants, and each time, my mother bought new branded bags and clothes. "This is a necessary expense for social networking," my mother would say, dismissing my father's objections. In reality, my mother was part of a group consisting of mothers from particularly wealthy families among Lizzie's classmates. She insisted that she gained important information there about the best cram schools and beneficial extracurricular activities. But to me, it seemed like her main goal was indulging in luxury, shopping at high-end boutiques, or getting beauty treatments at members-only salons. On my father's payday, arguments over credit card bills became inevitable. "Why do you need an Hermes scarf? You wouldn't understand." I don't want to be seen as the odd one out among the moms at that school. I still remember the stack of receipts my father laid out on the desk one day. A French restaurant in the Upper East Side, a nail salon in Soho, afternoon tea on Fifth Avenue. Sometimes, a single lunch gathering cost more than my father's daily earnings. My mother continued to spend excessively, using the excuse of exchanging information with the other mothers about various extracurricular activities. Piano, ballet, French lessons. She claimed it was all for Lizzie, but I often wondered if it was really to satisfy her own vanity. "The kid next door is going to a summer camp overseas. We need to send Lizzie too." My father worked overtime to meet her demands, but his efforts were never enough. My mother's demands kept expanding endlessly. I occasionally peeked at the household ledger on my father's desk. Amidst rows of red numbers, I saw him desperately trying to balance the family budget. The sound of him pressing the calculator late into the night still lingers in my ears. Despite everything, my father worked tirelessly for the family. He started working on weekends, and when he did come home, he was visibly exhausted. Yet he continued to treat Lizzie and me equally with affection. I still remember the warmth when he patted our heads and said, "You're my precious treasures." On his days off, he would take us to the park. We would bring homemade lunches, spread out a picnic sheet, and spend time together as a family. Looking back, that may have been our last truly happy memory. But my mother never understood my father's efforts. "Your income isn't enough to secure Lizzie's future," she would say, and their nightly arguments seemed never-ending. When I woke up at night, I often heard my mother's angry voice echoing through the house. Lizzie would play loud music in her room to drown out the noise. I could only lie in bed, trembling, with my face buried in my pillow. In the end, my father collapsed from overwork, which led to the divorce. However, my mother told a different story to those around us. My husband had an accident at work. My mother lied to the neighbors and school officials, saying that my father had passed away. "Widowhood looks better than divorce," she said, silencing both me and Lizzie. All of my father's photos were put away, and any mention of him was strictly forbidden. To the staff and parents at Lizzie's private school, my mother put on a flawless performance. With the life insurance my husband left behind, I'm doing my best to provide for my children's education. Sometimes she would even shed tears, crafting a story that evoked sympathy from those around her. I suffered because of that lie. I had to deny the existence of my father, who was actually alive and still thinking about us. For a child, that was an unbearable burden. I later learned that my father had been sending child support regularly after the divorce, but at the time I knew nothing about it. A year after the divorce, my mother met Davis. He was the owner of a real estate company. At that time, my mother was struggling with financial burdens and raising us alone, and Davis seemed to offer her comfort. "For the sake of the children, let's build a new family together," he told her. I think those words saved my mother, and her lie conveniently continued through the remarriage. "Davis saved me after I lost my husband," my mother would say, turning the story into something out of a fairy tale. When Davis came to our home for the first time, my mother introduced him to us as our new dad. Lizzie greeted him with a smile, but I was scared. I stared at the shadow of my father's memory, as if it were hiding behind Davis. After only 6 months of dating, my mother remarried Davis when I was 8. The wedding was extravagant, and my mother looked happy. But I couldn't shake a deep sense of unease. Something felt wrong, and that feeling eventually became reality. "We can finally be a normal family now," my mother said joyfully. But she was completely wrong. Lizzie naturally warmed up to our stepfather, but I couldn't. Davis appeared kind on the surface, but I knew better. His kindness was only directed toward Lizzie, and his attitude toward me was noticeably different. At meals, the table was always filled with Lizzie's favorite dishes, while my preferences were completely ignored. I think he resented me for not accepting him. He quickly became entirely submissive to my mother. Around that time, my asthma worsened. During an attack, I felt as if I were drowning underwater. The air wouldn't reach my lungs and I couldn't breathe. The pain and fear were beyond description. When attacks happened at night, I had to endure them alone. From the next room, I could hear my mother and Davis discussing Lizzie's academic future. No one paid attention to my suffering. That loneliness hurt more than the pain of asthma. The local doctor had warned multiple times she should undergo a detailed examination at a larger hospital. But my mother and Davis always deflected, postponing it each time. Lizzie's extracurricular activities are expensive. Investing in Lizzie's future comes first. I heard those words repeatedly. One day, I collapsed in the school nurse's office. A sudden asthma attack hit me during class. The school nurse tried to call an ambulance, but my mother insisted. "I'll come pick her up myself," and refused the offer. As a result, I was left lying in the nurse's office for an hour, waiting for my mother to arrive. The nurse called my mother multiple times, urging her to let them call an ambulance, but my mother stubbornly refused. Meanwhile, my sister Lizzie had started working as a model. At her prestigious private school, she consistently ranked among the top students. For Lizzie, no expense was too great. That was the mindset my mother and stepfather shared. Even when my asthma attacks worsened, my mother hesitated to take me to a large hospital for a proper examination. Going to the hospital takes time and money, you know. Because of that reasoning, I endured many attacks without proper care. In Lizzie's room, there was a brand new computer and shelves filled with expensive learning materials for her extracurricular activities. In contrast, my room had old textbooks and hand-me-down clothes that were worn and faded. The gap between us grew larger with each passing year. More painful than the suffocating pain of asthma was the weight of my family's indifference. When I was in 9th grade, everything changed dramatically. That morning, I didn't feel well. I had a premonition that I might have an asthma attack. But my mother left to accompany Lizzie to her mock exams, and my stepfather went to work. I was left home alone. The night before, I had told my mother, "I don't feel good," but she brushed it off. "You'll be fine. It's probably just in your head." Lizzie's exams were more important to her. By early afternoon, my fears were confirmed. A sudden asthma attack hit me. I tried taking my usual medication, but it had little effect and my breathing worsened rapidly. I called my mother, but her phone was turned off. If this keeps up, I might die. Panic began to take over. Desperate, I dialed my biological father's number, a number I wasn't supposed to call. I had secretly written it down after seeing it on my mother's call history. I often looked at the number, wondering if I should call him. But I was always too afraid of my mother's anger. This time, however, was different. Feeling like my life was at risk, I pressed the number with trembling fingers. "Hello. Dad. Help me. Myra? Is that you? What's wrong?" Through strained breaths, I explained the situation. The moment I heard my father's voice, a wave of nostalgic memories came rushing back. The view from his shoulders when he gave me piggyback rides, the breeze on the swings when he pushed me at the park. the warmth of his hand on the day we said goodbye. My father took immediate action. "I'm calling an ambulance right now. I'll meet you at the hospital." The moment I heard his reassurance, tears poured down my face. Everything I had been holding in collapsed all at once. The ambulance arrived in less than 10 minutes. As I heard the paramedics rushing in, my consciousness began to fade. When I woke up, I was already lying in a hospital bed. My father was there, waiting for me. Myra. Thank goodness. If we had been any later. He held my hand tightly, tears streaming down his face. My father looked thinner than I remembered. His hair had more gray streaks, but his gentle gaze hadn't changed. He stayed by my side in the hospital until my condition stabilized. And from that moment, everything began to come to light. After the divorce, my father had been paying child support regularly. A significant amount meant for both Lizzie and me. However, none of that money was used for my medical treatment. It had all been spent on Lizzie. My mother and stepfather had even purchased a vacation home using the child support money. A vacation home meant to be part of Lizzie's future. On weekends, they would take Lizzie there and throw lavish parties. They told me they were going out for Lizzie's modeling work, never once mentioning the existence of the vacation home. Meanwhile, the money needed for my life-saving treatments was withheld, and my necessary hospital visits were restricted. My father was furious. This is outright fraud, and above all, it's child endangerment and abuse. He reported the matter to the police. My mother and stepfather were summoned for questioning under suspicion of fraud and medical neglect. During the investigation, my mother confessed to everything. But instead of showing remorse, her attitude was defiant. Lizzie has talent. Nurturing that talent requires money. Myra is just an ordinary child. The investigation progressed quickly. The police uncovered detailed records of how the child support money had been spent. The $2,000 my father had been sending every month. Most of it had been used exclusively for Lizzie. A vacation home in California. Expensive private tutoring fees. Overseas training programs. Even cosmetic surgery expenses for Lizzie's modeling career. Meanwhile, only the bare minimum of my medical expenses, covered by basic insurance, had been paid. Doctors at the hospital informed us, if she had received proper treatment earlier, her condition wouldn't have deteriorated this much. By then, my health had already suffered irreversible damage. I was hospitalized for an extended period. "This cannot be allowed to go unpunished," my father said, his anger growing by the day. He consulted a lawyer and began preparing to file charges against my mother and stepfather. Eventually, they were arrested. The charges: fraud and child abuse. Even as she was being arrested, my mother shouted, "I did nothing wrong. It was necessary to nurture Lizzie's talent." Hearing her cries, I felt overwhelmed with conflicting emotions. Yes, my mother had abused me and stolen the money meant for my well-being. But she was still my mother. I couldn't bear to watch her being taken away in the police car, and I turned my head away. After she was gone, I entered her room alone. In a drawer, hidden in the back, I found a single photograph of me as a child. In the picture, my mother was holding me, smiling warmly. When did she stop seeing me and start focusing only on Lizzie? The case quickly drew the attention of the media. Child support fraud and medical neglect. Discriminatory treatment between sisters. The headline that shocked everyone was 8 years of faking a father's death. The revelation that my father was alive created a massive ripple effect in my mother's social circle. The PTO members at Lizzie's school were furious at her betrayal. Since Lizzie had attended the same prestigious private school from elementary to high school, most of the parents had known each other for years. For years, my mother pretended to be grieving the loss of her husband, when in fact, it was all a lie. Many people felt betrayed upon discovering the truth. So those tears were fake too. We felt so sorry for her, and even invited her out for meals. She trampled on our kindness. The lies my mother built snowballed into something massive. Reactions from the neighbors varied. I always thought she walked around like she was better than everyone else. But the children, how sad for them. Can you believe her husband was alive this whole time? Rumors spread rapidly, and more curious onlookers began gathering in front of our house. As the trial progressed, my mother's web of lies unraveled piece by piece. Even my stepfather believed that my father had passed away. The elaborate facade my mother had constructed was slowly stripped away, layer by layer. But beneath it all, the trial revealed something darker: my mother's own inner demons. A psychiatric evaluation during the trial revealed that she suffered from a severe approval-seeking disorder. She had an extreme fear of how others perceived her, and she compulsively lied to maintain an ideal image. This pathological tendency was likely at the root of all the distortions in our family. Still, I can't help but wonder sometimes. What if my mother had admitted to the divorce from the beginning? What if she had been able to live honestly, without being consumed by appearances and the judgment of others? Would our family story have turned out differently? Amid all this, Lizzie came to visit me in the hospital. Myra. "I'm so sorry," Lizzie said, tears streaming down her face. She was a victim too. Under the heavy burden of my mother and stepfather's expectations, she hadn't been allowed to have her own will. She had lived entirely under their control. For the first time, I understood her pain. Lizzie opened up to me. She told me that modeling, the cosmetic surgery, none of it was her choice. "The truth is, I never wanted to be a model," she said, her voice trembling. "My mom kept telling me, 'You're special,' but being special just became a weight on my shoulders. Because I was special, I wasn't allowed to have normal friends. Because I was special, I couldn't wear the clothes I liked. Everything was decided by her standards." Since middle school, Lizzie had been struggling with anorexia. She had been forced into extreme diets for magazine shoots. My mother hadn't noticed Lizzie's suffering. Or maybe she had chosen not to see it. "The truth is, I wanted to be a chef," Lizzie said with a shy smile. "But Mom always said, a model being a chef is ridiculous, so the only time I really had fun was during cooking classes at school." Lizzie took out her phone and showed me the screen. It was filled with photos of dishes she had made, secretly captured pictures, like treasures she had hidden away for herself. "Myra, we didn't know anything about each other, did we? I was forced to carry the burden of being special and you were ignored by our mother. But from now on it'll be different, right?" I nodded firmly. We hadn't built a real relationship as sisters before, but things would be different now. Lizzie had just wanted to live a normal life as a regular high school girl. "Lizzie, I'm sorry too. I didn't notice what you were going through." We embraced each other and cried. The years we spent misunderstanding each other, the days we kept missing each other emotionally, healing, all of that would take time. But one thing was certain: this was the beginning of something new for us. My father gained custody of both me and Lizzie. He adjusted his work schedule and prepared a new home for us. It was a small house, but it was filled with warmth. Lizzie quit her entertainment career and chose to focus on her studies as a regular high school student. With proper medical care, my asthma slowly began to improve. My mother and stepfather received prison sentences following the trial. On the day of the sentencing, my mother continued to justify her actions until the very end. Watching her, I felt a deep sadness. She had lost sight of what true happiness meant. Now, our family has begun a new chapter. My father surrounds us with the same warmth he always did. On weekends, the three of us have a tradition of cooking together. Lizzie takes charge of planning the menu, while my father and I help as her assistants. Sometimes things don't go as planned, but those moments are part of the memories we cherish. On my father's desk at work, there is a photo of Lizzie and me. It's not one of her glamorous photos from her modeling days, but a simple picture of us. My father loves us for who we are, just as we are. Lizzie has started studying to enroll in a culinary school. When I grow up, I want to open my own cafe, she said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. It had a natural glow that I never saw during her modeling days. Thanks to regular hospital visits and proper treatment, my asthma has stabilized significantly. Free from the constant fear of attacks, I've begun thinking about my dreams. I want to use my love for drawing, something I've cherished since childhood, to bring warmth to others. That dream is slowly beginning to take shape.